Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
This interview with Leslie Desmond experienced a bad internet connection that we had where she was dropping in and out dozens of times throughout the interview. So it's heavily edited. I apologize if there are still some spots in there where you can't understand what she's saying or whatever. I accept responsibility. I'm trying to present the interview in as full a capacity as I can, but I just do want to say we had those difficulties, and so if there's a spot or two in here that maybe seems a little incoherent or doesn't tie in, my apologies.
Our guest today is Miss Leslie Desmond. She is the author of one of the greatest horse books ever written, True Horsemanship Through Feel, a journey that she spent with Mr. Bill Dorrance, cataloging all of his ideas and putting them into a fantastic resource for the rest of it. She is currently working on some other projects based off of her 10 CD audio book set. I was just talking with her. She's saying that this is going to be two books put into one. The big title, overarching umbrella, will be called Bill Dorrance and the Gifts He Left Us, and that will be comprised of a section of Riding with Bill, and then her own section, The Feel of a Horse. Miss Leslie, how are you doing this morning?
What a nice introduction. Thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate the opportunity to join in here with you again. We did have an unfortunate, abrupt interruption in our connection, and I'm very grateful to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess I'll tell everybody about that because I have mentioned Facebook posts about this. Well, this is actually the third recording of a podcast that Leslie and I have done, and had some technical difficulties and all. And then I butchered some audio editing, and then had a computer die with all the files on them and a bunch of other stuff. So while this is our third chat, it'll be the first y'all will ever be privy to listen to. So anyway, I do appreciate your graciousness in willing to give me yet more hours of your time.
Well, I haven't suffered at all because I find you very interesting to talk to, very engaging interview style. And my background as a reporter, I know something about interviews, but I think I could learn a little. I'll try to learn a little from you today and see if I ever have to get back to my reporting job.
The secret is one cup of coffee too many.
Okay.
So, well, Miss Leslie, we start everybody off with the lightning round questions, icebreakers. These are for points and prizes, so you want to be sure to be on your A game here. First question, morning or evening? Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
Wrong question. I'm a 24-hour-a-day person.
I think on one of the last, how you like to make that statement out? You were talking a little bit about sleep cycles and that sort of stuff, and I don't remember the name of the guy that discovered that, but are you still doing that kind of where you sleep for 15 minutes every 3 hours or however that goes?
That was Buckminster Fuller.
Yes, ma'am.
It's 15 minutes every 4 hours, and anybody who's got a big job to tackle will be well advised to read his biography, because he talks about working in the 30s on some big projects for the government, and he had some impending deadlines that were 100% unrealistic, absolutely not humanly possible, and so he took some weeks out of his very tight schedule to figure out what exactly the human body needs, or his body specifically, but mostly what does the human body need to be able to function at peak performance? What are the sleep needs to be able to function at peak performance if your nutrition is covered and you're not, on a chain gang or something like that? But to really be able to have top mental output, acuity, good judgment, and continue on is 15 minutes every 4 hours. And people were freaking out while he did that study, and they were, we don't have time for you to do a science project, pal. We need this deadline met. And anyway, that is how he was able to persevere, and I did take that on. No, I do not do it that way at the moment, but just to give you a little background about why I'm a 24-hour person, and most people who know me well know that I don't require much sleep. Before I was born, had 2 intercontinental trips on a boat, which was several weeks on the water while my mother was coming back from a junior year studying in Europe, and then going back to join up with my father where I was born in Germany. I don't know, because I'm not a astronomer. I'm not a baby expert, but somehow if you move somebody around enough and you go through 11 time zones back and forth, somehow you're in those time zones, is all I've ever been able to understand. And the note from the German Army hospital, it was a German hospital that the US Army had access to, I should say, for whatever they needed. The notes that came home with me were in German, of course, but it said, translated, "Strange American baby, does not cry or require sleep." Pretty much the notes. And that was translated for me by my mother. But in fact, I didn't cry. I was there for a week, and then I was put into the loving hands of some ladies from the church while my mother recovered. Anyway, and then we went back again. So then I had my 3rd trip as an infant. I wasn't raised in Germany, but born there. So I don't know whether 3 trips back and forth across the water is what makes you able to sort of seamlessly feel refreshed and recovered in any time zone for extended periods of time. But that is how I've been my whole life. Probably more information than anybody needed, but as a quite private person, and I am quite a private person, I don't put a lot of my information out on the social media, probably mostly because I'm too busy doing things I love to do. But that personal detail of my infancy, I think, explains why I really don't require much sleep.
I'm thinking of a 3rd book that you need to be working on here, Leslie, because I really think the like side chats with you that have not a damn thing to do with horses are the most interesting conversations that we have. So I'm thinking Leslie Desmond, Celestial Time Traveler, or something along those lines, and then subtitle, I don't need no stinking sleep, maybe something like that, and then you go into these stories. Like, I think that could be it, because time, after all, the linear nature that we envision it, that's just a man-made construct. That doesn't really exist, right? I had another podcast with some ladies in Australia last week, and they're on the whole day in front of me. I'm talking to them on a Monday, they're talking to me on a Tuesday, and yet we're in the present. So 3 periods in time. It's like a triangle of there's got to be a 4th dimension in there, some other thing going on that we just can't quite organize our brains around. But time isn't real, people. It's not real at all.
Well, there's plenty of stuff that isn't real. And one of the things that isn't real is the word reality, because there is only subjective reality. And one can only take stock of that if you postpone emotion in your discussion. And this gets us right to the topic of true horsemanship through feel, or the feel of a horse, which is going to be that's the 2nd book I'm working on there, which I began as I mentioned. I wasn't able to finish that book. I had an accident in Germany, and I was unable for 7 months to sit down comfortably or drive or fly in a plane. I mean, I could walk a little bit and things like that. I could lie down and prop myself up on one elbow and do some editing. But in the end, I had to remake the text that I had done as an audiobook, because I could lean against the wall standing up and record. So that's how I made the best effort I could to deliver what in another format, what I had finished so far. However,
Yes,
but you see, this was really quite a bit before. That came out in the end of 2006 and 7. End of 2006, I was done. So that's 18 years ago, roughly. And that was quite a bit before audiobooks were in their the height of their popularity didn't happen after that, until after that, I believe. So I was ahead of my time on that one, but also out of time for anything else, because when you sort of take yourself out of the horse business for 7 months, you've got some catching up to do.
Yeah. See, celestial time traveler. I mean, it all fits. Okay, let me bring you back to the lightning round question, because we got like 20 of these. So, how long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
I don't.
Like it's not at all?
I don't eat cookies. Next question.
Okay. What is your favorite way to treat aches and pains?
I don't have aches and pains.
You're living a charmed life here, Leslie, but minus cookies, I guess. Maybe that's the secret.
Well, I don't. The answers are connected there, because white flour, processed food, and sugar all create inflammation. And in 2001, I learned my lesson, because I couldn't even close my fingers. Do you see how my fingers are here? And you can't screw them. In 2001, I had very long hair. I could not braid it myself. In 2001, I had to have my apprentices grab the wheel often if I would have someone sit next to me. A lot of the time I did my driving with my wrists. I could not grab. And even at dinners, there were several dinners where I had to have my meat cut for me before it came to the table at the kitchen. I learned my lesson about inflammation, because I didn't have any problem starting the day with a donut. Ever. And I never had, but right around the early 2000s, I got heavy metals poisoning, and I also had a poor diet. I wasn't raised to eat that way. We didn't have sugar in the house, so I more than made up for it. And I had sugar whenever I wanted, until I really couldn't use my fingers. But I went on you can see I have no aches and pains. Okay, next lightning question.
I was just thinking that could be an ebook as an aside. Leslie Desmond, your whole problem is too much sugar and sleep.
That's right. Somebody once told me sleep is for the weak.
There you go. Yes, but you will never remember your best night sleeping. That is absolutely right. What skill?
No, I do remember it. Got to correct you there.
Okay.
It was last night.
All 20 minutes of it?
It wasn't too long, no, but I did, because I'm starting to have very, very, very vivid dreams. So it's not exactly a sound sleep, but I mean, they're exciting.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going traveling in there. Okay.
Yeah, as we're recording this, we're right on the tail end of a full moon, and I've only had like 4 hours of sleep the last 2 nights, so that might be why I'm a little silly this morning. I don't know.
That's okay. You're silly enough. It's perfect. It's perfect.
What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you admire in someone else and wish you did have? So that could be body work, or is there some avenue with a horse that you have not explored and you would like to, and gain this other set of skills or something?
There are two. And I have made a good attempt at one, but then the horse couldn't hold up, because I was using a very fast horse who was extremely interested in helping me, but his body couldn't do it, so we quit. I won't push a horse when I know it's not right, and that is archery, mounted archery, and jousting. Those are two things I would be good at both.
Jousting, really?
Well, I mean, I don't want to hurt somebody, but I mean, it's nice to have your eye on the ball. I mean, jousting the way that they do it now, it's like mounted shooting or jousting or archery. I mean, it's basically you're moving at speed, and you got to be accurate at speed what you're doing.
Okay. So like taking the ring on the pole, not I mean, I'm no offense,
No, I
but
don't
I'm not
want to.
imagining that your 110-pound self would be hard to knock out of a saddle with a big pole. I'm thinking
No problem.
yeah, the 300-pound man is probably not going to be a fair fight for you there within the jousting ring. I'm imagining, Leslie.
Well, first of all, it isn't going to be any ring, and second of all, I'll be on a faster horse, and I can outmaneuver pretty much anybody on the right horse. But I found that out when I was teaching polo, and I only taught polo for a short period of time because I didn't understand how hard it is on the horses and how truly destructive it is. So I got out of that. That was back in 1979. I taught polo for a year and I was good at that. That's why I was wanting to do the archery and the mounted shooting and the other things. But in order to do that, you really do have to have time and practice and go do this and that. And at least at the time when I wanted to do that, I would have needed another type of income because I was still trying to feather my nest and pay my bills in the horse business. So I didn't have time to dilly-dally around taking aim at things from horseback. But those are the things that I think would have been a really fun, a little bit like slalom. You know, it's like skiing at top speed down a mountain. I mean, I don't mind that. I don't mind doing that at all. I like it. And I think jousting is a little bit like slalom. You want to try to get between the boundaries.
What is the most important quality of a horseman? We just have these real small, easy little questions for you like that.
Yeah, that's a dandy. May I use 2 words in the answer?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
My answer would be good judgment and the ability to read a horse accurately.
Amen.
Good judgment takes a lot of time to have, and it's based, as we know, on multiple errors, multiple tries, and the capacity to forgive yourself and the horse and keep going instead of get hung up on the mistakes. So I would say that once a person has learned how to pass over and not take it personally that the horse didn't understand you, because the fact of the matter is, if the horse isn't understanding you, it's because you don't know how to present it. It's not because he's willfully trying to thwart you. And this is where most people make their mistake, by indulging in anger at the horse. There's no place for that.
Yes, ma'am. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
Depends on the trailer, but I haven't been in one I couldn't back in a figure 8 or whatever I had to do. I mean, I've one time got caught in a storage unit place trying to unload where they said, yeah, just go around that corner. And oh boy. I said, do people unload there? I had a 3-horse slant load, and I had 1 credit card width between the wheel wells on both sides, and it took me 4 hours to get out of there backwards. And I did it, and I didn't take any paint off. But that day taught me a lot about, number one, listening to anybody who tells me I can go through there with a trailer. This was fortunately 20 years ago. I've learned, or more than that even. It was in California. I can tell you when it was. It was in 1998. So that's plenty of years ago. But most people who tell you you can get in somewhere with a bumper pull trailer have never driven one, and that's what I learned that day. So yes, I can back any trailer. I can back any trailer. Yes, and I can do it left or right, not because I'm bragging, but because I've made enough mistakes to get the good judgment that I can now do it. Come on, I'm 70 years old, for crying out loud. Oh, okay, let me put it like this. I am an honest person, but I'd have a darn hard time admitting it if I had to give myself anything less than a 10 by now.
DIY or sub it out. So are you a do-it-yourselfer, control freak, I'm going to do this myself without help, or are you hand it off to somebody else and let them take care of it kind of person?
Well, if you took out the word control freak, I'd say the pleasure of the satisfaction of a job well done surpasses most things. I know that I'm not good at wiring, and I'm not bad at plumbing. I'm good at plumbing. I don't mind bending pipe. I don't mind working with pipe. But electricity, I leave that to other people. I don't like to do wiring, things like that. No, they can do that. No, I learned. I was just raised to do it myself. It wasn't I think you used some word about control freak. My father taught me how to work on cars when I was small, so I don't think that my tendency to work on my own vehicles is about control. It's just what I was taught. I
Sure.
had to hand the wrenches and do all the stuff with my old man. What a great guy he was. Holy cow. He died right in front of Christmas last year, so I'm still missing him quite a lot, but he shows up
Sorry
when he
about that.
needs to. We're all headed out the door at one point or another, but he left me with a treasure trove of information on how to take care of myself. So I maybe it's a control thing, but I think I like to give away whatever would help me in the bigger picture. For example, I don't own a snowplow. For example, I cannot abide painting a house. I had to paint houses in high school to get. Oh my gosh, what a horrible job that is.
I'm right there with you. I would rather fight a bear than have to paint a house. Yes, ma'am.
It is the absolute worst. Cutting in those corners and all that masking tape, you can forget it. Okay, so yes, I would say I'm very. I like being able to do most things, but as you would understand and perhaps agree, the problem is not the jobs and how to hire the right help to do it. The real problem is that life is short, and you need to prioritize the things that are going to please you to do them yourself or benefit the bigger picture of what your goals are. So I try to, refinishing furniture and painting houses out of the question. That's somebody else's job. I'm pretty clear on. But as far as growing food is one of my favorite things to do. Training dogs and horses, I'm right there. I like beautiful outcomes. I like cooking, and I like cooking for tons of people. I've often wondered if this notion of past lives is true, whether I was a wartime cook or I don't know, some kind of I cook for 100 people. When I start cooking, it just I don't have the space for the food. I don't know why, but it's pretty much what I've always done. And probably my mother and grandmother did the same. So maybe I just learned it there at the stove. I don't know.
Bay or sorrel? Do you have a preference for colors of horse at all?
My best horse was gray. My second best horse was gray. And they both got cancer. So although a gray horse is a beautiful thing to behold, born black, turn gray, turn white, get cancer, die. I only try to stay away from pink-skinned, pink-eyed horses just on account of at the time when those horses were passing through my days and then through my life. They didn't have those nice fancy face protecting sun shields for horses like they do now. You can pretty much I've seen many horses burned by the sun and very, very painful skin. So I'd say I'd just try to stay away from pink-skinned horses just on account of it's a lot of maintenance, and I feel sad looking at them that way. I wish people didn't breed them that way. Bay or sorrel, I've had both. I just love horses.
Yes, ma'am. Do you think that it is cruel that they put an S in the word lisp?
Yes.
Very nice. Oh, I've never clapped for an answer before that. Yes, ma'am. Abso-freaking-lutely.
Gosh darn. Have you ever been to Spain?
No, ma'am.
Well, I don't know about the truth of this, but in Barcelona, it was apparently, and I say apparently because I don't know. I'll have to ask my friends if this is true or not, but I've heard them joke about it, so maybe there's some truth to it. There was a king, I don't remember who, or a prince, but there was a feared and revered leader who had a very severe lisp. And so the whole country in that region began to speak with a lisp so that people had to stop laughing at him because he would behead them, or he would see to it that they crossed trails with a guillotine. I'm glad that you liked my answer. I have known many people who spoke with a stutter and spoke with a lisp, and it's painful for them. So I have empathy for people who are trying to fit in with their speech and cannot, as much as anything. But my answer still stands.
I think whenever we have those types of disabilities, the walking on eggshells about it is the worst thing that you can possibly do. The making a little fun, teasing a little bit, and so forth. I used to be an adult leader for a Boy Scout troop when I was in college, and there was a boy on there. I talk about him a lot. He was missing his left arm from just past his elbow, and it was not off limits to talk about. He would draw little faces on it. He named it Bob. He'd do like a little puppet show with his arm. I mean, he just had the best outlook. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't uncomfortable, and specifically because you could mention it, you could make fun of it. And so
no, I hear you.
Yeah.
I think in the end, what I've learned how to do is just try to read the person and see whether they've come through a tough grade school experience. And if you just have to take everybody separately. The people who've been supported through their challenges are generally going to be a lot better off than the people who've had to stand alone and take a pounding for it.
Dogs or cats? Do you have a preference?
I'm allergic to cats, but I admire cats. Some of them are extremely funny. They have a very entertaining way of dealing with other animals, and of also dealing with us. I've never owned one because we just didn't have them in the house. My brother and I were both allergic to them. Dogs I love. So I would just say animals I love, but the cats, I just haven't had an opportunity to get close enough to them to cherish them the way I do a dog.
Do you have a particular breed of dog that you favor?
Ones with hair.
Okay.
So that's kind of a general thing. I don't like those hairless cats and hairless dogs they've come up with. I'm not in favor of that. No, I have a hard time with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they did that. But anytime you start jacking around with nature, it doesn't sit well with me to see those things,
Yeah. People love to play with recessive genes for some reason.
It really goes against the grain for me to see an animal without hair. It's something wrong with that idea. So yeah, as long as the dog has hair. I've had many dogs. I trained dogs in high school. It's how I bought my first saddle. My father taught us how to train dogs, and he didn't hit them and yell or jerk on their neck or anything like that. In a way, it's kind of interesting. He didn't teach me how to train a horse. My first horse that he arranged for me to get from down the road, a girl was going off to college, and she had an old horse that had come in from England. He had been in Newmarket at the big timber races, the steeplechasing. And he was 13 and kind of laid up. He was getting over a bowed tendon, and she went off to college, and I got this beautiful horse. And my father didn't teach me anything about training him, just how to get back on, because whatever I was doing, he unloaded me about every day, often many times a day. So I got really good at tree climbing. And my father taught me how to set him up so that I could get on a really thin birch tree, tie him up. He taught me how to tie him in the right place in the woods. You could climb a birch tree, bend over, and get right in that saddle and plop down and let that tree go. And that's what I did a number of times up there in the national forest that was at the end of our road. And he basically got us climbing trees for lots of reasons, and one of them was for getting back on my horse. So the training aspect of animals has always interested me, but really I learned to train dogs from my dad, and it fit right in with the way Bill handled livestock.
Mm-hmm. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
I don't eat pizza, so I don't know.
There's carbohydrates and flour and all of that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I need working hands. Got to keep my hands out of the inflammation range. So yeah, no, I don't know about that pizza thing, but I'll ask my friends and get back to you on it.
So you mentioned that you like to cook and that you are a cook. So what is your favorite meal to cook?
Well, this is going to be a little bit, excuse me, a little bit of a wise guy answer. When I'm cooking for myself, I just include, there are two things I think. Is it going to be a hot meal or a cold meal? And either
Let's say a
way,
hot meal.
okay, it has to have in it enough fat and it has to have garlic in it. And if you're making a vegetable meal or a meat meal, I do not eat commercial meat, haven't in 10 years. Eat game or meat that I know where it came from, like down the road. I don't know how long we're going to be able to continue to eat that way, but it's what goes into that food. I don't use a book to cook, okay? I've had many people ask me to make a cookbook. And that is not because I'm a great cook or anything, but because I think it's because of the way I cook. I just do it. And whatever's there, you turn it into something nice. However little you have or whatever you do or don't have, you figure out how to use the right balance of fat, acid, protein,
I like that
vitamin.
saying with cooking that like you add the salt or the spice or whatever until your ancestors tell you to stop. That's just, it's not a half a teaspoon or whatever. It's just, yeah, that seems about right.
So and anymore, the key thing is you have to know where your stuff is coming from. You got to know where it's sourced. And for example, is your salt mined? If it's mined, does it have any heavy metals in it? If it comes from the sea, is it coming from an inland sea? Is it coming from, Salt Lake City area? Or is it coming from seabeds? Is it Celtic sea salt? Is it Himalayan mined salt? Or Himalayan, however you want to say it. You just got to understand where your stuff is coming from nowadays. That's what I mainly do. It's not, do I have a special dish? I'll just tell you another thing about this. Okay. Here's how I got over the heavy metals poisoning and the inflammation. In addition to changing my diet, I relied on information that was connected to my blood type. It's called Eat Right for Your Blood Type. I think anyway, the guy's name is Dr. Jonathan, Jonathan D'Adamo, D apostrophe ADAMO. So I have A positive blood, and I looked at the things that I was eating that were clearly creating inflammation in my body and making more work for my digestive processes, the enzymes in your stomach, all of what you need to do to eat properly and not go against what your body is saying. And I want to talk about this for a moment because it matters to me greatly. And I don't have a lot of regrets in life. I have a few. And one of them is that I did not take off the internet when it was on there. There was a paper from Cornell. There was another paper from Tufts. There had been a call for papers on blood typing in horses because you have to have, for optimum health, the food that your blood type works well with. Now, A positive blood is not a fan of nightshades, which would include potatoes, eggplant, bell peppers, tomatoes. Okay, I happen to like all those things quite well. When I was eating a lot of sugar and reckless with my diet and not caring, start with 2 donuts and then have a ham sandwich at lunch with whatever kind of bread there was. When I was eating that way and where I ate birthday cake if it was passed to me and a bowl of ice cream whenever it came along, when I was eating that way, my body would revolt against everything my blood wasn't synced with. And once I got myself cleared out of the heavy metals and the inflammation, I can now eat those things with no ill effect. But when you talk about what's my favorite thing to cook, it's anything that would put a smile on somebody's face that's eating it. And what I've learned to do is to find out if I have large groups of people, whether anybody's allergic to nightshades or whether the kinds of things I like to cook with make a problem for people, because I can like to cook whatever I want. The minute it bothers somebody who's eating it, then I don't feel so fine. You see what I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
It's not the answer you were looking for, probably, but
I was thinking like scallops, but I mean, hey, whatever. No, I'm teasing you. That's fine.
No,
Yes, ma'am.
do you like scallops?
I do. I like just about any kind of seafood that there is. Seafood is one of my favorite categories of food. So there's not a whole lot in seafood that I don't love.
Well, how about if when our paths cross sometime, I will make you my seafood chowder. See if you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Sounds like a plan.
I know you'll be honest.
Yes,
I know you'll be honest.
Would you share with us a horse industry related pet peeve?
Yes. Double standard.
Okay. Which one? Which of the many?
Exactly. Exactly. And one of the things that bothers me the most is armchair warriors who are criticizing people for what they do with their horse when they haven't even had a horse for more than a year. They didn't grow up around horses. They're following people for personality and social reasons, ganging up on people who are doing their very best. I'll give you an example. There are many examples that you can find out there, but basically what I don't like is, on balance, the way social media has interfered with the joy of owning a horse for many people.
It has its downsides for sure. Yes,
and
ma'am.
it also has a profoundly powerful and effective and educational feature, which is not to be scoffed at. I mean, the kind of education you can get now on the internet, if you choose your mentor wisely, you can find out a tremendous amount of information that you wouldn't have been able to find without traveling long distances, say 10 years ago. There's just an immense amount of information out there, but you've got to be a discerning consumer. If you can't get to somebody to check them out, and what I usually use as my guidepost is, I like to see someone ride their own horse. And then I like to see someone on the first or second ride on someone else's horse. The horse will tell you what the person is doing. The horse will tell you if it's a fitting approach. And that doesn't mean that the horse is the only way to tell. But I would say my pet peeve is multifaceted, because I think most of the people getting into the horse world today will probably not be in it in 3 to 5 years. As adults, they don't stay long because they run out of money, because unscrupulous people relieve them of their investment very quickly, buy the same horseback that they sold them. What my basic pet peeve is the way that horse-loving people are exploited by people who know how to do that, and they're still willing to do it. It just gets back to something that's just about human nature in the end. I mean, in the 30s, there was a whole effort by the federal government right around the time when Buckminster Fuller was working on his offshore turbines, trying to figure out whether you could get. He was on the project that he learned about all this sleep science, was to see if he could get electricity from the tides. But they never really overcame the problem of how much sand gets in this thing. You can't have tides without a bunch of sand and seaweed and fishes and all kinds of stuff flying in there and messing up your machine. Now, I don't know whether they've improved on that and they're just sticking it on the shelf for when there's nobody left here to even need the electricity. But whatever it is, anyway, in that same period of time, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he put up a lot of federal money to record things that were happening in the Depression. There was a big dust bowl. There was a big dehydration. There was huge droughts all over the Southwest. The place was drying up. And he did a lot of things. He authorized the collection of data in real time, recordings, stories, photography, videos, whatever they have from back there. It's fascinating treasure trove of real life and accurate depiction of America in some of the very hardest times. So one of the projects that they did, they put out several books, and the one that I like the most is called Mister, You Got Yourself a Horse. And it's a story, real true stories of the way that horse dealers, after the advent of the combustion engine, and all of these horses were flooding the market, where people were getting cars, and tractors were taking over, and you had threshers and balers and this and that. And, people were still out there trying to get, Massey Ferguson or John Deere or all these other ones. The windmills were still pumping water, but you had a lot of people involved with mechanics and much more. The shift was getting away from fixing the harness and repairing wagon wheels, and it was going straight into mechanics and automation and all this. So there was just a flood of horses on the market, and still plenty of prospective buyers who didn't know enough about horses to see what they were getting sold. So this book, which I highly recommend people try to find, it's called Mister, You Got Yourself a Horse. It would be really good if somebody could ever do an audiobook on that and put it out as a Kindle book. It is the funniest book, and you know just from reading it that it's 100% true. But this was all the way that people were tricking people into buying a horse, and buying a horse that wasn't going to hold up or do the job. Or one horse had strangles, and strangles is not polite to look at, and this horse was just really in trouble. So they did some things to hide that problem. And then there's horses that had wobbles, and horses that had this and that, and the descriptions are just so believable and so credible. But I wouldn't say that people have changed much, and I'm not trying to impugn horse dealers as a breed, because as a breed, horse dealers are a breed, as sort of like used car dealers. But of course, there are good car dealers and good horse dealers too. People who love cars and want you to be a return customer. But the kind of horse dealers that you find now on the internet, how many horses have I had, Danny, that in come to me that were first time horse owners, bought them straight off the internet, delivered to the back door? I can't believe it. And that gets back to do you like a bay or do you like a sorrel? Or do you just like a good screwing on the internet where your money goes away and the horse is totally useless and needs to be euthanized like tomorrow, if not today?
Yes,
I've seen just way too much of that. So I would say that's my pet peeve, is that basically it's become a platform for the keyboard warriors, the know-nothings, and to some great extent, exploitive people. But that's just really more of a comment about human nature, I should say, because those people those folks are out there. Just gotta be sharp. And I like to go around people like that, not straight at them.
It's kind of like lawyers, right? 95% of them are giving the other 5% a bad name, right? So this is normally kind of a throwaway question, but I have a feeling I'm going to get an interesting answer from you on this. So, feral or spoiled, which would you rather deal with? And I guess for you, I have a secondary question. Do you believe that there is such a thing as a spoiled horse, or would you categorize that some other manner?
Thank you for saying that. Well, it's all pretty subjective, because you say feral horse. It depends on how you find that feral horse. I mean, a feral horse that gets delivered to you in a rope and halter in a trailer is feral and likely damaged in some way, because the BLM historically has had some pretty rugged ways of delivering horses to the public. Were they born in captivity? Are they Mustangs? Are they really feral? If they're really feral, you're out there in the woods or in the wilderness. So in that case, I'd have to defer to Monty Roberts and ask him how he snapped his fingers and got Shy Boy to gallop up to him. If I knew that trick, then I'd be all about the feral horse. But when you talk about feral as delivered by the BLM, they're spoiled, but they're spoiled in another way because they got, most of them, a very bad idea about people. I've spent time with Mustangs. I've had several. I've trained Mustangs for people. I know that they can climb a 12-foot fence just like a fox. They can go right up and out and over, get hung up on the stifles, land in a heap on the other side, pick up and keep going. I saw a horse do that down in the Carmel Valley one time. I opened, it wasn't 12 feet. That fence was, I think, probably more like 7. It wasn't a big horse either, but it was up and over he went, got hung up on the stifles, landed in a heap, and he was up there in that river valley there in the Carmel Valley. He was, I think it was weeks before they got enough guys that could get him sort of positioned in a way they could rope him in a field near a parking lot, get him somewhere where he wasn't going to get hurt or get in the road or something. So I don't know really how to talk about a feral horse unless you're talking about really out there feral, in which case I probably by now at 70, I haven't got time to go get a feral horse and deal with it. But I've had plenty of horses come straight from the BLM to me, and I've had plenty of horses that are conditioned by people who really wanted large pets. And I think that's the kind of horse that people would say are spoiled, where what we're talking about, how I would define, I think that the word spoiled has to do with an opinion that someone who would do something else or would not create that kind of horse would comment and say, you've spoiled him. And I think that really there's just two things that mainly are indicative of what people call spoiled horses. There's probably more of an answer than you wanted, but I'm just going to give it to you anyway in case it's useful for anybody. The horses that are pushing on people and not disciplined for that. And my way of saying that doesn't mean I would discipline a horse for that, because I don't. I handle that another way. But I think the horses that crowd into you, you got to remember how they learned that. They learned that by being rewarded for crowding with a hand-fed treat. Literally, when you offer a horse a treat by hand, he's looking for a second one. You take a step back to put your hand in your pocket, and all of a sudden he knows he can move you when he's looking for a treat. Horses like that are called spoiled. And the people who do that generally quickly get on the other side of the fence, continue feeding, so that they don't have to discipline them. They don't even know how. They don't even know that they're creating the problem. But a horse that is paid off with a hand-fed treat to move your feet because you love a big dog, these horses are no longer horses. These horses, when they are disciplined for what you have set them up to do, so you reward them for crowding, other people or your trainer or your farrier or your vet or yourself later on, you say, what the hell? And I'm going to pound on you for doing this without realizing your contribution to the problem. The horses are not to blame for this. They are doing what they're taught. They're doing what they're shown. What horse doesn't want a second carrot and take it if it's put in under his lips? You know how they teach you, hold your hand flat, don't get your thumb in the way. We're taught that as tiny people. Here's how you hand feed a horse. But often, if you're on the other side of a stall wall or the other side of a gate, people don't understand the damage they do. This teaches a horse to pound, to paw at a door, paw at a gate, push on something that's solid. All of these are man-made problems, which once you start to discipline the horse to that, you see, that becomes a setup to fail. I teach you to do this. I punish you for it. Now, if you were to take that over into the human realm, oh, sweetheart, calm. Let me see. Does that hurt? Did you get a little boo-boo? Come over here. Let me hold you a minute. Let me take care. Let me look at that for a minute. Whack! Really? You bring this kid up and seduce him into coming, thinking you're caring. Give him a little treat, give him a little comfort, then punch him in the nose for being on your lap. Okay, well, that's, social services is full of children who grow up that way. And foster care is full of children who have had that type of double message, that type of misleading, absolutely impossible to understand affection, which is affection right until it isn't. And then you're in the way, or you had mud on your shoes and now you're rolling across the floor with somebody's foot in your ass. I mean, these types of things is what goes along with human beings. This is this is what human beings deliver to dogs, to horses, to their own children. So feral or spoiled? I can't really answer the question. I'll have to consult with Monty about how you snap your fingers and get Shy Boy to gallop up. But what I can tell you is that the Mustangs that I've had that really were tough to deal with have all had, so far, in my experience, I've had about 3 that were tough that I did well with, but I was never able to eradicate it for someone else. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have, so basically the horses that get the toughest treatment coming out of the feral environment, the toughest treatment or the hardest lessons through the BLM or return trips to the BLM, they know people well. And in my experience, they remain dangerous unless they become a one-person horse. I thought I could return a Mustang to someone who I had trained it for. And when I got that horse back a week later, it was to the point where, unfortunately, she was so dangerous, she had to be destroyed. And I'd spent 2 years with her. I taught with her. I had beginning riders on her, but I put her back in that environment where she came from. And I thought that I had adequately addressed the problems for her, which I had. I had other people who could handle her, ride her, get around her. I trusted her completely. And she came back from that situation after 1 week, and she was deadly. So I don't know. That is the definition of a spoiled horse. She was ruined twice. So it's
I think we've clearly discovered a 4th book here, Leslie. I think, yeah.
No, which one?
You're going to have to live a long time to get all of these books written.
So what? Give me the title on the 4th one. Let me see if I'm up for the task.
Leslie Desmond, feral or spoiled. Either way, it's your damn fault. It's a working title. We could tweak it a little bit, but I think we're in that direction, something like that.
Okay, I'll remain open. Let me get this next project done, and then we'll have to revisit this.
How about this? Poor horsemanship without feel. Maybe. I'm just spitballing here, but I think we've got something. There's a thread to pull on here and see what unravels.
Well, I've been paying attention for a long time, so I have quite a bit of. I can compare things. I've seen quite a few things over the years. Certainly not all. I'm still working with horses regularly, so I'm sure I'll have new information in a month.
What is your least favorite barn chore?
Oh, I can tell you. Getting a derailed barn door back on the thing, up on the top, the 20-foot door that come off the runner. That's awful. Just terrible job. I had to rig up a come along and pull the door up. I had so much wire out, it couldn't really all fit on. I had to add wire that couldn't fit on the winder. Stick it up top, grab that door. Needed a lot of help. It's not that safe, It's not that safe a job. That's too high up in the air anyway, and the doorways. Does it weigh a ton? I don't know. It's a huge job. That's my least favorite job right there.
That's a job for somebody who can joust big enough to, right? All right. What is your favorite barn chore?
Would you like to know the other 2 things I can't stand in a barn to do?
Sure.
I've already given you one. I've already given you one pointer. Fixing electricity. Now, electric fence, even that is annoying. I was one time checking fence in the rain, and I had a blue ball of light come over and hit me right there above my front teeth and burn my gum. I can't. It's tricky. That electricity is tricky. I saw that in one shot. I saw that arc come off there, hit me right above the front teeth, inside my mouth, knocked me flat. So I don't like working with electricity in those barns or in those fences. Or dry day, okay, I can do it. But boy, oh boy, it's annoying to get shocked. It's so annoying. Then the third barn chore that is, well, I'll just say it as it is. Being in any of those barns that has DDT coming out of the misters all over yourself and your horse and the food and the water, that's not a chore that I don't like, but being in there is something I don't do. I will not go in those barns anymore, and I do not like handling horses because they are covered with poison. And if you want to know what DDT is, you want to know about all the stuff that was recycled after Vietnam and after World War II, all of the chemicals that we have in our fertilizers, you just look at where those came from. That's all military waste, as far as I know. That's where we got all that stuff in our ground, in our soil, in our stuff, because it kills things. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I've heard two talks about it. I can't quote it chapter and verse, but people get very upset about flies on horses. Well, maybe they ought to think about how those flies go on the tightest part of the horse there is. What's the tightest part on most horses? Tightest part is the neck in most horses that have been ridden. The neck, scapulus, the top of the croup, and the belly. Okay? So what do? They cover them with poison so that they don't move their bodies trying to get these flies off. Now, a horse alone in summer, that's not nice. But a herd of horses, and I have many, many, many hours of film of horses taking care of each other's flies. And they don't have to, these people do not have horses that have flexibility issues. You got a mare that can get all the way back up inside by her udder bag or milk bag and take a fly off with her teeth. That's flexible. Well, why you got a horse that's standing in a stall with a sheet on covered with poison? That horse is stiff as a railroad tie, right? It's like a brick. It's a ride of brick. Got horses that don't even put their head down on a fetlock all summer long because they're all suited up and duded up and poisoned up. And then you complain about having a stiff horse. I mean, you pay for body work because he's so stiff all winter long. You could have all summer long to let him deal with the flies and take care of his bugs. I mean, this is what nature intended. I'm not saying that you don't put a broch out. You know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. I will say on this, there's one of these little deals that floats around social media, and I feel obligated to confirm that this does in fact work. If you get like at the dollar store or something, they'll have these little poise, not the right word, but basically it is a little replica of a dragonfly on a stick. And dragonflies are predators of mosquitoes and flies and all these things. If you take one of those dragonflies on a stick and you put them in your horse's mane and tail and stuff, there will be no flies on that horse. The flies see the dragonfly, they fear it, they stay away. It absolutely works. It's crazy. I understand that it sounds crazy. I've tried it out. It actually does work. So go figure.
That is nice. Yeah, that's a great thing to have in mind.
No chemicals. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say the fewer heavy metals and the fewer toxins you can have in your body, the longer you're going to live in a good way, and your animals too. I think it's really time that we pay close attention to this.
What is your favorite barn chore?
Well, getting there.
Okay.
Just going there. Just going there. I like fixing fence. I like the look of a clean pasture, I'll tell you that. I like the look of a clean pasture when it's done. Probably the most rewarding is to get in there, and I don't have to do it myself because I don't let it get this way, but probably cleaning water pails, getting all the stuff that's really not nice, testing water. I will say one thing. If you got chlorine and fluoride pouring into your horses, just want to think about that.
That's actually one of those things I would love to see a study on. I've done kind of anecdotal stuff myself where I've got the water trough I haven't messed with. I have some plants in there and I have some goldfish in there, but you do get kind of this layer of algae and so forth. But it builds an ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
I can take that trough and I can put a perfectly clean trough right next to it, Clorox it out, get it all clean, and horses will drink out of the one with fish and algae and plants in it over the super clean one. I kind of wonder if like there's, one of the most important things in the horse is the microbiome and we probably negate that the water that they drink with whatever microorganisms would be in that and algae and all of those things is a part of that cycle for the horse. I would really like to see some research done on that, whether cleaning that water trough and Cloroxing it or whatever and having it perfectly sterile is actually beneficial or harmful for the horse. Would they rather drink out of the pond that's got all the life in the water or the perfectly sterile environment we tend to want to see?
Right. Well, you already did your research. I don't use Clorox on anything except something that I know is, and then I let it out in the sun, and then I don't use Clorox in pails. I don't. The only time I would do that would be if there were extenuating circumstances. But generally, you just use white vinegar, and that's going to cut through just about anything, any bacteria. I mean, really what you're trying to get rid of with Clorox is harmful bacteria. And white vinegar will do that too. White vinegar, anything that's acidic is going to knock all that stuff out. I mean, it wouldn't make it surgically sound, but I think if you can look at all the things that isopropyl alcohol, all the things that are involved with all of that. There's all kinds of stuff that we use to make things sanitary, but the horses are going to go always for running water. So if you drip over your tank, you're in a really dry area. If you have the possibility to let your tank drip so they can at least get their feet wet when they're drinking once or twice a day, they're going to go for any kind of moving water. And the other thing is that anything that will support a fish is clean enough, generally speaking. Although we now have super high aluminum content in the water all over the country, and cadmium, and all kinds of other things. So you can do mineral tests on your water and see what sort of thresholds your horse can actually tolerate. But if it won't support a fish or that green stuff, that's not a problem. It's the stagnation that is the problem. In other words, let's say you have a big stock tank without a float in it. There's no running water in it. There's no refill in it. It never drips over. When that water gets to be 120 degrees 7 days a week or 100 degrees 7 days a week, what you do is you cover it up with wood. You can cover up the center of it with wood so the stock can drink on both sides out of a spot. And that way, it's not all of it right in the direct sunlight. The other thing is you want to know whether you're using black plastic tubs that off-gas into the water or galvanized tanks. You have your choice, or are they drinking down on the ground level? You can basically bury, and this is something that I've would do if I ever had the opportunity to do it again. I would take one of those huge, big, round galvanized stock tanks, and I would put that right in the ground with a drain so the horses could drink with their heads down. And then you would be able to cover that, and it would stay cool in the earth. Do you see what I mean? If you drop it, let's say you just excavate that and stick a drain in there. I don't know whether, I'm sure that somebody would tell me there's something wrong with that idea, but that's an experiment that I would do, because it would keep like I'm thinking in many places in California, like you take your winter weather where it's a little wetter and a little colder, put your tanks in so that they're flush with ground level, and then you can have a refill. You can have a float that's in the center, or you can plumb it from the center so that there's like a little fountain in there, and then the horses can drop their heads down. You could cover half of it with wood, or you take the 3/5 of it with wood, cover it like that. You can do a lot of things. You can just experiment in ways to keep the water cool enough that it can support life and not burn everything out of it. It's just a thought.
Mhm.
But by
Yes, ma'am.
now, the groundwater here in my state, for example, and all over the Northeast, I'm in the Northeast right at the moment, but the groundwater here is 500 times the federal allowable limit of aluminum in it. And that was back when I had a last water test done in 2018. 500 times the legal allowable limit of aluminum. So there's nothing to be said about that except to just do your homework on it and figure out where you're going to get your water from. But we've always known that water would be the next big scarce resource. We have not done our due diligence to protect our water resources. We've only been here a few hundred years and we've trashed it. So that's people for you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Don't got to respect the gift we're given.
Water's kind of important. Thoughts or feelings? Do you consider yourself more to be a thoughtful, cerebral person, or more of a go with the feeling and the gut and that sort of thing? I don't necessarily know why I'm doing this, but it feels right. What sort of person are you?
Hopefully by now I've lived long enough to know the balance for each situation. If you were to ask me when I was 20, it would depend. I was pretty academic. I was pretty intellectual. I was a big reader. I was a big studier. I did a lot of research on things. I wrote a lot in those days. I was a journalist. And I would say even then, I was probably pulled around by my feelings to cover the things I did. And I was a water case law and water quality journalist. I mean, that is what I wrote about. I was an environmental reporter. So I would say that I had a mix of both then. And I wasn't sensational. I didn't write in a sensationalist way. I wrote in a very factual way. I never had a story kicked back for being false or fake news or something. So I would say I probably had a mix of both because my father was a good mix of both. And I learned, my father and my grandmother both gave me a lot of information about how to balance that, I would say.
Okay.
A lot of other people in my family were tipping the scale in some other direction, but my father and grandmother kept me on a pretty even keel, I would say, as far as how to, where I should stay, where I should be. Right in the middle of the both. I hope I stay there.
Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
Yes, I do. Hey, well, I'm going to give you the wise guy answer first. I know that you're talking about something animate. You're talking about an object, but
it could be whatever it is. When I originally designed this question, I was thinking more the sentimental kind of a thing. Like I've got this saddle that was given to me by so-and-so or this particular bit, but it could be that, it's a rope halter and a 15-foot rope, or it's whatever you want it to be.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say the equipment that I really count on is what I've learned. And it's not necessarily, I'm not an equipment dependent operator. I'll put it like that. But if I had to take what I do, what I will tell you is that I had a really good amount of time around people that understood horses very well and could do anything they wanted with damn near any horse. And learning how to use a riata, I'm not talking about now for roping cattle because I'm not a roper. I'm not a roper. But I do use a riata when I'm starting a colt. And I do use hobbles when I'm starting horses. And I do educate the neck before I'll ever educate the mouth. So that basically I'm gonna ride a horse, train a horse, or reschool a horse so that he's sure about where I want his feet, in what sequence, at what speed, and when, without a fight, without him fighting me or me fighting him. And so the tools that I have learned is a figure eight hobble. And teach him how to understand that, and that'll help your farrier. I'm not talking about just lash 2 feet together and let him hop off into the sunset and take his chances. I'm not talking about that kind of hobbling. That's for the birds. There's too high a risk rate with that. I do it another way, and I do hobble a horse thoroughly before I'll say that he's a horse that I trained or a horse that I'm going to ride. I don't train horses for the public anymore, but I do teach trainers how to train them, and I do teach people how to use a set of hobbles. And I've had more good feedback from dressage trainers in this last year on the beneficial effects of having taught their 3 and 4 and 5-year-old green horses how to hobble and respect it and stand and stay and wait and ask and set up a communication that is not about struggling fight to the finish or raw legs or any. I'm not talking about one bit of abrasion or struggle or thrashing around. And there aren't too many people that teach it this way, but I do. And I use hobbles. I use a riata, and I use a couple of 25-foot ropes if I got enough room and a horse that is prone to bolt. I'll make sure I got a 50-foot rope and a riata. Not even a good fence. Sometimes some of these horses you really need to have in a closed arena, depending on what you're trying to get straightened out. But like you pointed out, you're almost right. I'm not 110, but I'm 108, and that's close enough. But the same as I weighed. That's the same as I weighed in 8th grade. But the point is, it's not about the leverage. It's not about the chain or the pain or the drop nose band or all of the strings and pulleys and stuff you can do to make a horse submit or to do whatever you want to do like that. That's a lot of people like to do that, but those are the horses that come to me later with just immense mental and physical problems that take a while to straighten out. And sometimes you really can't straighten them out, to be quite honest. The damage is done. So what I do is I train the mouth last. I train the head last, because if you have a horse that's been out, you have to look at what their history is. But if you have a horse that understands how to get a fly, your pole is already loose enough. So you don't have to teach flexion of the pole. You just have to show them when you want it. You don't have to teach it. They already know how to flex the pole if they've ever gotten a fly off their rib cage. You know what I'm saying? Longitudinal and lateral flexion is not the same as this head twisting thing that a lot of people think is lateral flexion, where you got one ear going down to the ground and the other ear going up to the sky. You know how
Amen.
They twist that head around. The horse has got his mouth underneath your stirrup. No, thank you. That's a good way to
Amen.
get one running. No, thanks
Yep.
for that.
That's
But,
one of my biggest pet peeves. Yep.
Yeah, that there you could add that to my list right there, is people who don't understand that and who are teaching that. And the other thing that's really unhelpful is these people who walk around, click for this, click for that, click for everything, and the same folks are likely to say whoa every couple minutes while the horse is trotting. What they mean is, would you slow down a little? But whoa is whoa. If you're going to teach a voice command, that better mean something. So I don't know. I mean, you asked me what's my favorite equipment. In the end, it's just going to be your ability to read a horse and your body language, and hopefully some kind of area that's got enough room for the horse to make a choice and not have to submit and then get defensive and try to hurt you or try to get away. You just really need the right amount of space to train a horse in. That's what I can tell you. And I don't have to tell you like that because you already know. But particularly if you're dealing with stallions, and I get called on a lot of those ones. Some of them are really huge, I'm telling you. I've had a few experiences with studs, one of which I will write in that book called The Feel of a Horse. It's a story I've told to several people. Take about 2 hours to tell that story, so I'm going to write it instead. But it's amazing what the people are willing to do to get a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old stud over here and sell it to somebody who's going to fork over anywhere from $80,000 to $280,000 for this thing. And then who do you deliver it to? Somebody down in Lexington, Kentucky or Ocala who can't handle it without a needle and a stud chain? I mean, come on. What are you thinking? This is where horse training gets a bad name. This is where social media gets a bad name. This is where, like you say, what did you say? 95% of them give 5% of them? Something you said there about the lawyers.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. The 95% give the other 5% a bad name. Yeah.
There certainly is probably room for argument on that ratio. There are plenty of people out there that know what they're doing with horses, but those that are marketing quick trained studs to get on a plane and show up over here and be delivered to people who have no clue and no experience. By the time they fail and go through a few of these boutique trainers, they get sent out west for cowboy training and come back with their hat in their hand. But you see, those dressage riders and a lot of those upper level folks that are whatever that means, they're not prepared to get a horse back that had 3 or 4 failed attempts in the fancy zip code areas, and then get shuttled out to some desert someplace and worked over till he doesn't even know who he is, and then sent back, and he's no longer fit for the job. So it's astonishing to me. But there is one stud that I worked with, and I'm going to tell that story about, and I had to buy another horse to do it. See, this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that you sometimes need another horse to help you train a horse, right? So that you can get around, so that you don't get hurt, so that you can be on a horse that can stand up to that horse and not let that horse do to you on his back what he has been doing to people in stalls and aisleways. And it's much more helpful if you have a horse that comes in loaded for bear and is already a predator, 3 and 4-year-old import predator from Denmark or Germany or somewhere. I've been around that kind, okay, and more than a few times. So I'm not maligning anybody. It's just a phenomenon. It's called quick sale of a stud, and they get them ready to go on a plane or do whatever, and they dump them out to the trainer who's purchasing for the investor or for the syndicate or whatever. But by the time some of these horses arrive, they already can't stand people. I think the value of training a horse that has already become a predator, the value of training a horse from the back of another horse, shouldn't be underestimated. Because if he's already learned to take people out, and you're mounted on a horse that isn't going to tolerate that, you're going to get to that horse's feet a lot better than if you try to continue teaching him how to fight people, where he's already learned quite a few more tricks than you might know about how to avoid getting haltered or hit again or whatever else. I'm talking particularly now about stallions that seem to take quite a bit of the brunt of human ignorance when it comes to quick sales of a stud. They get pushed through a training system, many of them, and dumped out here completely unprepared for life around people with high expectations and, insured to the hilt, lots and lots of money spent on them and the transportation and all the rest. But in the end, many of these horses just go through 4 or 5 boutique trainers who've got more ways of hurting a horse. And then in the end, it gets sent out to some cowboy in Oklahoma, which is a challenge in itself, the transportation, the training. But by the time they come back, they're not fit for the dressage world. They're not fit a lot of times for anything except ranch work. Anyway, those are some of the reasons why I like to use the equipment I use, is because even horses, and that equipment includes a good saddle horse.
Absolutely. Stallions are definitely one of those areas that some people are really good with them, and they don't treat them any different, and they still come out of the program just fine. And other people can really take them off the rails and turn them into the dangerous worst thing you got going on. Yep. Okay. Final question for you. What is the best smell in the barn?
Fresh hay.
All right. That's a good answer.
Fresh hay.
Well, like I said in the beginning, this was all for points and prizes, and I'm tabulating your score here. And I have good news for you. You're the highest scoring guest that we have had play this game so far. You've got a grand total, a new record, 3,584 points, Miss Leslie Desmond. So that entitles you.
I did not know you were giving scores on this. Oh my goodness.
So that entitles you to either a genuine compliment or an awkward silence, your choice.
From who?
Me.
An awkward. Oh no. I'll leave that up to you. You're the master of ceremonies. You decide. You've already given me a compliment.
We'll do an awkward silence then. How about that?
Okay. There's the awkward silence. Thank you. You're funny.
I love awkward silences. That's one of my favorite things. So anyway, okay. Well, Miss Leslie Desmond, would you kind of give us? I'm sure everybody is somewhat familiar with you, but would you give us kind of the 30,000-foot view of what it is that you do in the horse business?
Well, I was pretty long-winded on those other answers, so I'll try to keep this to one sentence. I'd say my goal is something I'm learning how to achieve better and better, is to fit where I'm needed when I'm needed.
Okay.
30,
I like that.
30,000-foot view.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us? I mean, obviously you're well known for the book True Horsemanship Through Feel, but how do you do clinics and things? You're a guest on multiple podcasts. I know you're doing another one this afternoon. You're writing some other books. What sorts of offerings or methods do you have to play that role? Like, do you do virtual lessons with people? You have online groups, or how do you go about accomplishing doing whatever you're needed to do?
I understand. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the podcast that I'm doing this afternoon is an online coaching session that I offer to my students. And I'm gonna explain to you how I work now, because it's a little different than what most people do. What I do, Danny, is in the clinics I take only 4 people for 3 to 5 days, and they get a 90-minute lesson. And this is after an initial day of a demo where I work all of the horses, and I watch them walk, I watch them move, I watch them handle their horse a little bit, and then I work their horses on the first day, and we talk about all the things that we are going to see affect the animal, trying to address that they think they want to work on, or that they think could be improved, or that has been missed in training and things like this. So it's basically, they get relaxed the first day or an evening, long evening, for 3 or 4 hours while I work with those horses. Okay. I do take auditors, but I take auditors in 2 ways. I take walk-in auditors. You can come for a day or for the whole duration, but I don't take questions from auditors who come in that way. I pre-register my auditors. Pre-registered auditors are welcome to ask questions. There's time for questions several times a day at the 3 or 5 day clinics that I do. But I only take 4 riders, 4 people handling horses. Even though I've only take 4 people, by the time those 4 people and 6 or 7 or 10 auditors have been discussing things for 4 hours a month, we kind of know each other, and we kind of like each other, and we kind of have an idea about some things that they can do before the clinic to get their horse going better, whether it's diet or equipment adjustments, or they're having trouble in the barefoot to shoe transition or the shoe to barefoot transition. We discuss all these things, and everybody kind of gets real comfortable. And by the time it's clinic time, it's kind of a reunion in a way. It's kind of, it's a different format that I put together, because I don't think, well, Ray Hunt used to say, if you take away 5 or 10% of what you learned this weekend, it's a lot. I learned the most by watching and by listening and by being able to ask questions over the years. Surely I did learn when I had colts and clinics, and I was learning how to do things I hadn't done before that was helpful. But really what I learned the most from watching. So I do understand the value of auditing. But as these clinics of mine have gotten extremely focused, and I'm a lot of trainers come. I do take first-time horse owners also on occasion. They find their way to me and decide to just kind of start in with a pretty intensive and pretty thorough background. They really want to. This is really the truth: is that advanced work is only a refinement of the basics, and if you're missing some of the basics, your advanced work is going to fall apart on the way there, or after you think you've arrived, you'll realize that you've actually hit a plateau. So those are the people that find their way to me as a rule, and many of them are, by now got quite a career and quite a following and all of this and that, but I don't want to forsake the auditors because that is where I learned so much in that capacity. So I have two types. You can walk in and watch for a day or for the demo. You can come for the whole time. However, I prefer that if questions are asked, they are questions that are not going to be too basic. So the people who really, really want to learn as auditors, who cannot pre-register, they come in and they're going to learn by listening, not by asking questions. The ones who are going to ask the questions are the riders, and then those auditors who pre-registered and joined the riders in a 6 to 12-week advanced discussion. We talk 4 hours a month, usually for 2 to 3 months before the scheduled course. So we know each other quite well by then. We got an idea, and the auditors are also welcome to submit pictures of their horses, questions they have about their own horses, because of course it's easy to understand that the riders will benefit from that as well, even if that might not be a problem they're currently experiencing or a thing they've ever seen before. You can't learn enough about horses. I mean, there's always going to be one more horse that'll present you with something you never thought about or you haven't seen. So I'm finding that this has been very successful. It does take up a huge amount of my time. The auditors pay more than the walk-in auditors, but that also gives them the privilege of joining right in at the rider level and being included in all the discussions. And then during the course, they can ask questions at the question time. And that's really the only way that I can be fair to the riders who only have 90 minutes a day of private lesson with me, but there's only other 3 people. So it's a very intensive course and I'm loving it. People like it. It's a good format. It's a little more expensive than what I thought I would have to charge, but it's absolutely worth it for, or at least has been so far, for all concerned. And so that's a different clinic format. The other thing I do is I am available to rescue centers, and I'm available, and I do fundraisers for people who are working with, equine assisted learning. I do fundraisers for people who are involved with the rescues, rehab, thoroughbred rehab, breed-specific rehab, and lay-up places, and just the general public places that take in horses from kill pens and from less than great circumstances when people can no longer take care of them in a good way. So I do fundraisers for those all over the country when I'm traveling, and I try to set that up ahead of time. And obviously, they don't get 100% of the money because I still have to get there and I have to get down the road to where I'm going. But I found that it is a wonderful way to share knowledge and to meet very, very dedicated people who just don't have the opportunity or the funds to travel and to get a good education, or at least to expand their education in new ways, which I am certainly committed to offering while I can. So those are 2 ways, is the private courses, where we actually meet and then have quite a bit of online time before that. And I've successfully done this for the last 3.5 years. So I usually have about 4 or 5 scheduled. So every other week I have quite a bit of online work to do. And I keep all of that in 1 week so that I don't go completely mad. So the biweekly lessons the biweekly discussions are very intense, very fun. And they are also recordable, so that people who have to miss, for example, I have this right now, I've got 2 that are going in the States and in Europe. And they started in Europe, these 2 particular ones. I added people from the States because they've got clinics over here. But right now, at the moment, for example, these are happening during a work day, so people can't attend. So the recorded sessions is what they will get afterwards. And in Europe right now, the ones are at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, spanning 3 time zones. So when I start the groups here at
after work, after chores, 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, which is generally when these sessions are, because these are working people so far. That's what I have, is working people. And that, of course, puts you at about midnight or 2 in the morning in Europe. So they are the ones that get the recordings if they join the ones that are starting here, just to sort of explain it. So there's a certain amount of people that will have to rely on the recordings, but they still get to put their knowledge, their questions forward, their videos, their horses they got stifles that are weak, and horses that sort of drop out from under a person on the turns, or, a real common thing is for a horse to kind of bunny hop through the lope. Are you still there? Okay. Excuse me. Yeah. So some of the things that happen quite often are horses that are truly four-legged lame, and no one knows. They can't see it. They don't understand that the horse is lame at 4 feet. And so I teach people how to read that. Well, he's kind of sluggish. He hasn't had much activity lately. He doesn't want to move. Well, you don't see a horse limp when he's lame on 4 feet, for example. And, join up the back feet together to get around a turn. They'll go like a little bunny rabbit in the back, and people say, wow, look how hard he's trying. Look how he digs in. It's nothing to feel good about. It's what he's doing to manage to keep going, because when a horse can't lope with a proper gait, can't have a leg and a lead leg coming out, I teach people how to read this and what to do about it. Usually it involves very weak stifles or compromise in the hoof capsule somehow. Teach people how to read this. And, I'm in dental school for the 3rd year. I still do not do horses commercially myself. I work with people who do. And I teach my students also how to open a mouth, put a speculum on, how to feel the teeth, and to read the mouth. Okay, because there's a whole lot of people out there working on teeth that do not give the clients a written record. There's a whole lot of people out there that don't even keep a written record themselves. So let's say you had a child and you lived in Cincinnati, but you're going to move down to Tampa or out to Denver. Be nice to have your child's dental records sent ahead so that the new dentist will know what to do. And that is why dental records are kept on horses. So I sort of let people know that this is the professional and preferred way to do it. So if you're relying on someone, whether it's a registered person, a certified person, a vet, or anybody else, if they're not providing you with a written record on request, or if they don't keep one themselves, you might want to rethink the caliber of dental care that you're paying for, because generally speaking, somebody who's professional will know how to do this and will have been instructed how to keep good dental records and make them available to the client, and not shy away from calling on people with more qualifications when they get in a mouth that they are not qualified to work on competently. And that's a very common thing. And I think that humility in the equine dental care world is something that's in short supply. Make their dental care people feel more confident to use the 3 words, the 3 golden words that I think add credibility to anybody's career, which is, I don't know, or I need help with that. That's a little above my experience level and pay grade. The horses' mouths are very complicated. They're also very straightforward in many cases. But if you start getting into neglected mouths and less experienced dental care people, you're going to have a mess. And that's why I got into dental care myself. So that's one of the things that I teach is the fundamentals of dental care. I am not currently doing horses commercially, and I am not ashamed of that at all. I'm not going to go out and practice on your horse, practicing on my own. So I have horses that I do. My work is supervised, and I'm working with a variety of different people that are far better than I am. And until I'm good enough to really go out and be sure I'm going to do a good job on your horse, I won't be. And that's the way I feel about it. And I recently invented something which I'm not going to put on the market. It's only going to be something for people who take my class, but there is a way to have your body work get all the way into the hoof capsule so that you don't have to go through all the different litany of things that people are trying to do to deal with so-called navicular disease. There is such a thing as a cyst on a navicular bone, a crack or a break in a coffin bone and a navicular bone. But most of the time that I've seen, number one, I'm no vet. I make no pretense about knowing more than a vet or knowing more than anybody. But I can tell you what I am sure about And that is because I've been to the bone piles. I would say poor hoof care is probably 90% of the reason that people have the diagnosis of navicular. Oh, he's got navicular. It's the most ignorant comment there is, because he has 4 navicular bones, one in each hoof, right behind the coffin bone. But that is not like saying he's got a disease. Most people who say, yeah, my horse has navicular, as though it's some sort of a flu or a virus. The navicular bone is in every horse, and it sits at the back of the coffin bone, known also as P3, flange 3, or phalanx 3, down right at the end, right above the sole of the foot. But that navicular bone has a very sharp edge to it. And in fact, in the podcast I'm doing today, I've got quite a few skeletons that I've pulled out of the bone piles at different ranches where I've been over the years. Because if you can't see these things, then it's just words or a piece of paper or somebody's drawing or some photograph that you can't really understand well. You got to hold these things and see that razor sharp knife edge at the back of that thing. Yes, there's cartilage, and yes, there's fascia, and yes, there's tendon sheaths and all sorts of things to make it glide along. But it's really an amazing, amazing system of extension and retraction and extension and retraction in the horse's foot. And as that deep digital flexor tendon is caused to stretch and stretch and stretch, as a neglected gets deeper of the heel in the ground and longer toe, the diagnosis of navicular, as though it's some sort of flu that they picked up at a show somewhere, is ridiculous. The unsoundness starts to set in many cases, and I don't know percentage-wise how many, but the minute you've got that navicular bone and that the inside of that skeletal structure inside that hoof capsule at an angle where that raw edge starts to grind into that tendon sheath, it's no different than taking a piece of baling twine and just rubbing it 30 times on the edge of a brick. You're going to cut through it. So it's the lack of maintenance and the lack of knowledge in this hoof care, in my opinion, that is leading to so many diagnoses that is producing solutions which really don't do that much good. So these are the kinds of things that I'm trying to make people aware of. No, I am not a vet, and I'm not pretending to be a vet. I am developing in my students the empathy and compassion for the few vets we have left in the large animal industry, so that you can start to talk with them, interact with them in a respectful, compassionate way. I'm sorry, but I do know the curriculum at these vet schools all around America anyway, and certainly in some of the foreign countries I go to, and I go to a pile of them. Dental care is not a focus.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't. So when you are paying the service who are working in the dental care and hoof care field, these are usually very passionate people, usually very passionate people and very serious people, but they can only rely on the education they've been fortunate enough to get, or in some cases could have been more fortunate. And those who are not that fortunate in the educational system they ended up either choosing or having to settle for, they'll find out very quickly that they need more, that somebody will move on, or a vet will come in and say, oh, no, or the horse will say, oh, no. And before you know it, we have what we have today, which is a tremendous amount of disagreement, but also at the same time, some very productive discussion between vets now and farriers, between barefoot people and vets, between body workers and vets and farriers and dental people. People are, finally starting, consumers as well as the professionals are finally starting to understand, I think, that we really need to look at the horse as a whole system. It would be wonderful if human doctors could do the same. But I think we're going to have a lot more. We're going to have a lot better results getting the disparate horse professionals together than we would ever the human doctor industry.
Yes, ma'am.
I will say that this is part of the education. This is part of the education, though, that I now provide and encourage all of my students, the auditors as well as the riders and trainers and horse owners, is how to speak with people that you believe and are probably sure know more than you do. But how do you ask defensive professionals to be accountable without offending them or being rude? But you are, if you're going to be writing that check and you're going to be living with the results of their care, you need accountability. Sorry. If you're not able to talk to these people, you probably have the wrong professional. Somebody can't answer a question and show you why they're saying what they're saying, or have the courage and the sense to say, I don't know, when they truly don't. Then I think this is a skill that I am giving to my students now, because horses are cheap. They get shuttled off at the rate of about 175 to 200,000 a year to the killers in Canada and Mexico, since we chose to export that unfortunate end. Much longer trailer rides than they used to have. But in any case, that is a fact of life for horse owners in America. And I'm trying to do what I can to make the end of life for horses that are kept at home better, and also to give the new owners and even the old time owners who just have had one horse maybe or two in the backyard, and the kids are gone and the old horse is out there out back. They don't spend much money on it anymore because the kids aren't actively engaged. These are the people I'm really trying to help, so that the education doesn't stop.
Yes, ma'am.
And
we do way too much work after the fact, when we could have helped them a lot in the prevention, like with hoof care and dental care that's done appropriately. And like you say, with dental care, if they overdo something, that is not a mistake that will heal itself quickly, unfortunately. Something
it doesn't.
that you were talking about.
Danny, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to introduce the sponsor for the episode, but if you need a break or something like that, that's fine.
No, I just wanted to mention something. We got into a poor reception situation when I was talking about the blood typing in horses and the papers that I read from Tufts and Cornell. And this was back in the early 2000s. And I thought to myself, let me download those. I want to read them in full. I want to study them, and I want to compare these papers later, because there was a call for papers. I don't know by whom. It might have been from Farnham or Merck Labs or whoever it was that, handles a lot of the animal medications. And I went back and I read, didn't download, went back and I read, didn't download. Now you don't find those anymore. But I was reading in these papers about blood typing for horses and diets. I mentioned that earlier about Dr. Jonathan Diademo's book, Eat Right for Your Blood Type, which is how I got myself out of the heavy metals and sugar pollution real liability I had in the 20 years ago, where I really couldn't use my hands. So I went at the time to see about it with horses because of all the sugar feed and because of all the colics and laminitis and all the stuff that horses get when they are in domestic care. Okay. So unfortunately, what I found out later by doing some false after I was unable to find those papers, they were taken off the internet. What I found out is that there are I've seen estimates as high as 32 different blood types in horses around the world, and certainly 16. Can I prove that? No, because I can't find the papers. But what I was told is that these papers were removed and taken down, and there was no further action on that, because quite much the same, it would require the commercial feed companies coming under a lot of scrutiny for the inflammation that the molasses and the corn is putting into these horses, that requires, just like it requires for us, some way of addressing the inflammation. And yes, that's handled in a lot of ways. But I would say, you start getting involved with somebody's bottom line too aggressively, they're going to let you know about it. And so I think what they did was, for all the best reasons and all the right motivation in the beginning, I think that what these universities were doing was to study diet, study feed. I think that they ran into quite a bit of opposition, or they ran into quite a bit of funding withdrawn if they were going to continue to do anything of the status quo as far as feed sales. And I bet you if we did a study nationwide on feed sales, you'll find that molasses and beet pulp and corn and other high intensity, let's just say heat producing, inflammation related dietary supplements, because that's what molasses and corn and beet pulp are. But anytime you're adding something that is not in nature for the horse, he's got to figure out what to do with it in his body. And I found very quickly, and to my great disappointment, that those studies were withdrawn, and I don't know about the blood types in horses. I'm sure that if you dug hard enough, you could find out. And also, I mean, at this point, it's probably not that important, because it's pretty clear to see that what horses eat when they're outside is they can eat anything, roots and bark and moss and dirt, and they get what they need from the earth, and they've learned how to do it over millennia. But where we have them in the backyard and your choice of what to feed them is the feed store down the road, this starts to get more challenging, particularly for people whose horses have learned how to start eating the barn. And, you know, so the only other thing I wanted to say is that in my courses and in my coaching, private coaching is something I also do, but I find it's a lot. Private coaching when I travel to places, yes, of course that's available. But what I'm going to start offering again, which I'm very excited about, is the wilderness rides up in northern Sweden. And I've got friends up there that are extremely, extremely skilled. They've got wonderful horses, 22 horses up there, and literally hundreds of miles of trail. And it's a very affordable adventure. And while we still have access to travel and whatever resources people can pull together, that is, if you want to have a full-on experience and ride for 5 days, 6 days out, it's on horses that are very reliable and know the job. It's an experience not to be missed. So I like to get people out where things really, circles out of the commercial environments and the urban environments, but you kind of get the idea, I think, about me now a little bit.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you had mentioned earlier about lazy horses and weak stifles and stuff, and that actually was a very good segue into the sponsor that we have for this episode. So, Leslie, the episode sponsor for your episode is Speedy Feet. Are you suffering with a lazy horse? Would it be easier just to pedal a bicycle instead of this 1,200-pound gelding all over the national parks? You need Speedy Feet. Is your kiddo maxing out all that their 27-year-old beginner's Play-Gay horse has to offer, but you can't afford to get the $50,000 step-up horse? You also need Speedy Feet. Speedy Feet uses the marvels of modern chemistry to give your horse the oomph that he's missing. Speedy Feet does warn you that your plug will morph into a steed as soon as you begin using Speedy Feet. So you'd better hang on and be ready for the ride of your life. Our founder, Dr. Heisenberg, has been testing Speedy Feet on the bush tracks of Mexico and South America for the last 10 years. And the statistics don't lie. From polo to barrel racing to escaping the untamed tribes of the Amazon, Speedy Feet will give your horse the stamina and drive to walk on water and break you out from bad situations or into the winner's circle. As this is cutting-edge chemistry, we can make no promises as to the drug tests that might be involved in thoroughbred racing, trotters, endurance racing, or barrel horse futurities. But if you're not involved in one of those particular events, it's full send and wide open, baby. Speedy Feet has free shipping on all orders, and the minimum order is a half a kilo. We don't do addresses in town, so be prepared for some airdrop coordinates in the desert by a few drones we liberated from Amazon.com. Speedy Feet is modern. Speedy Feet is a miracle. Speedy Feet is not a myth, but Speedy Feet might be meth. Speedy Feet. No more lazy horses for you. Okay, so we've paid the bills for this episode now. Very new sponsor.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I assume you do write the copy for that, don't you?
I do, yes, ma'am.
Gosh darn. May I ask you? Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Where'd you get your sense of humor from?
It kind of runs throughout every generation in my family has a funny person, and I'm the representative for this particular age. So my mom has a pretty good sense of humor.
Figured.
Yeah. My dad does also, but his is a lot more select. So anyway.
Well, that was very fun, and thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It's my pleasure. These little things just come to me from here and there, and I write them down and develop them out. So
I have a little question for you about your what they call the hit questions. What do they call the hot questions in the front?
The lightning round. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, lightning round. Gosh darn, those are hard hitting questions. But why did I win? I don't understand. What? How do you get this point?
It's just
you just said that.
Part of the gag. Yeah, it's every single new guest wins the game and gets the choice of the same two prizes. It's just kind of part of the running gag of the.
Okay, that's great. Okay, yes, that's what I think.
Yeah. So yeah, we try not to take ourselves too seriously around here. So. Well,
maybe I was too serious in some of these things I said, but I hope I wasn't too serious.
No, it's okay. And you are kind of breaking in and out, so I'll just warn you, I'm gonna have to chop some chunks out of some of these sections where it kind of breaks up a little bit. So I'm sure it'll be fine in the end and everything. So I'm going to ask you a couple of these kind of questions that I would hate to be asked myself. But since you wrote a book on the subject, what is feel? How do you define it?
That's a very good question. Because I wrote this book with and for Bill Dorrance, I used his 6 definitions of feel right in the glossary, right in the back of the book, chapter 9, called meanings. Bill didn't like that word glossary, and for many months he fought me on it and said we couldn't have one of those in our book on horsemanship. And I said, why not? I said, Bill, the language you speak is from the last century, for heaven's sake. I said, there's 161 words that you use all the time that I barely took me 3 years to understand what you were saying. Please, can I make a glossary? He says, no, I rather think we shouldn't. Where we're writing about horses, we wouldn't want to get into that other thing there. Well, finally, I told him that it was meanings, because he said, you really seem kind of set on this word you got there. And I said, you mean the glossary? I said, yes. I said, I can't, we were only about 4 months away from going to press after 5 years. And I said, 4.5 years in there somewhere. I said, listen, it's just not working out, Bill. I gotta make a glossary. He said, well, what would that take in? The first time he asked me about it in 6 months. And I said, yeah, but I said, that's where you put your meanings. He said, oh, all right, then we'll call it meanings. He said, because that other word there, you need a dictionary. So he was full of really fun comments like that. And it only reflected the fact that he was a rancher at the age of 6. In his mind, there was one thing to do in life, and that's ride a horse and move cows and move them in a right way. And he got his start in a chicken house with his brother Fred, rounding up those chickens in there and giving them a what for. They got in quite a bit of trouble for that.
Yes. So how do we define feel? In that, if we look up meanings in chapter 9, what is it going to say for feel?
It's going to say direct feel, indirect feel, your better feel, a mellow feel. And then there's 2 other kinds of feel that have to do with how you look at the difference between feelings, physical feel, and what you can expect from yourself and from a horse as you exchange information through your feel.
But I'll tell you the reason it's so hard to understand how to define feel. It'd be like trying to explain to somebody what a blueberry pie tastes like, and they've never had a blueberry pie. How would you possibly explain that? If somebody's never had a mosquito bite, how in the world are you going to describe that? So that is why Bill goes to great lengths to describe feel. But what I can say that it's not is feel is not a technique. It is, and I'm going to actually, in this book that I'm working on, The Feel of a Horse, I have another way. I'm certainly going to list Bill's. I'm going to borrow some of the definitions that I use in my book that I have come to understand Bill's meaning. And I will also expand on my understanding because, Bill's been gone since 99 and I'm still here, thankfully. But what I did was realize after he passed that a huge amount of what he left us with, the gifts that Bill left us with, I had absolutely no clue how to use because I had only been studying and becoming sort of a scribe and, to the best of my ability, an educated recipient of his trying to synthesize 9 decades of his involvement with horses. I mean, good Lord. He was rounding up chickens when he was 5. And so he died at 93. So he had a good 88 years of ranch work, if you were to ask him. Well, when I was up there at the ranch, even at 91 and a half, he could still rope 200 head before lunch. At 91. He was still going to Brandon's then and holding up every bit of his end of the day. So, there's a lot of different ways of looking at feel, but let's just say this. If you can tell the difference between what it would require to remove, let's say, an eyelash from the cheek of an infant and pound a fence post into the ground on a dry, hard day where the earth is pretty resistant, those are 2 different kinds of feel, and you adjust accordingly. That's your physical feel. You're not going to go toward a, you're not going to
literally how much pressure are you going to use here? 1 pound or 20, right?
Right. And also the emotions that go along with that. If you're putting 20 pounds of feel into a colt to keep it from running in the street, it doesn't mean that you got the same attitude and feel when you put 200 pounds into a fence post. Dealing with animate, whether it's a puppy or a baby or your sweetheart or whoever, whatever you have to do, you could put 200 pounds into somebody who didn't see a car coming and knock them flat and do them a favor because you love them. That's another kind of feel, right? But you might have to use the full, this is what Bill would say, you might have to use the full extent of your physical strength to get done what might, in another frame of mind where both parties are on the same page, just a thought or an ounce. Bill described his understanding of effective applications of good horsemanship as the capacity to have an infinitely adjustable feel and a flexible and adjustable agenda. If you're just going hard line into 1,200 pounds that has no idea what you're asking of it and no idea what you're telling of it, let alone forcing it to do, you're going to get a tremendous amount of resistance. And to not understand your contribution to creating that resistance is not any aspect of good horsemanship. To impose your will on a flight animal and not understand that their nature is to want to get along, then you've missed it. You've missed it entirely. This is one of the things that Bill wanted people to understand about a lemon and an apple. Then you have enough knowledge about feel. You can discern with the wind on your face or the taste on your tongue. You already have a start on feel because it means you're aware and alive. So it's easy to teach it. It's easier to teach it and show it than it is to write about it. That's for sure.
I think Tom had a line in his book where Tom Dorrance, he said, if I could crawl inside your skin for just a second and then you could feel what I'm feeling and I could direct you here and there and then you would understand what it meant instantaneously. But it'll take me 40 years to teach you without being able to do that. So
Yeah, it just, some people pick it up a little faster than others. And I think I'm better at teaching it now than I certainly was after, I was still kind of fresh and new at the concept myself. I think I do a fair job now. But what I love is that I'm starting to get wonderful, wonderful feedback from my students and their students because it is teachable. It is teachable. And by the time you've got your student sending you in the winter on horses that look like they want to be with them after the ride is done, that feels good. The higher levels of competition where the horse wants to follow you home and he wants to jump right in the trailer and get home and let you fuss with him, and because the relationship doesn't change just because you're in the show ring. These are exciting things for me to tell you about, because I have really enjoyed working with people in all disciplines, and they're really starting to have some absolutely wonderful effect on their students and on their students' careers, and it is deeply rewarding, I have to say.
So that brings to mind a couple of different topics, and I think first you had already mentioned about hobbling and all of that kind of stuff, and now you've just brought up the taking away flight from a flight animal in order to develop that connection. One way you could look at that is that hobbling a horse is cruel because we've taken flight away. And another way you could look at it is that we can use this aspect to teach a lesson. So what are you trying to get, or what do you think comes from hobbling a horse, and how can we do that ethically?
Quite a few questions there. And I think the best thing for me to do is to pick up a thread and start, and then you can ask me another question if I get off track a little bit. But let me start by what hobbling is not for me. Okay. I'll show you. I want to explain how I never use hobbling, because I'll just say I'm a good hobbler. And everybody I've taught it to has also become a very conscientious and good and safe hobbler. And I teach it to everybody that I work with, almost without exception. Doesn't mean that everybody goes out and buys hobbles, but they understand the value. And I have many, many, many reports of people who have told me that they had a horse that was cast and waited. They had a horse that was stuck in a fence, barbed wire fence, and waited. They had a horse that got down in a horse trailer and waited. So my goal is to use this. You only need to hobble them once or twice for them to understand this. You don't have to. It's not like a big, long, drawn out thing. Sometimes I only leave a hobble on for 6 or 7 seconds with one leg up. Now, not two. I don't start with any 2 legs. In the end, you can hobble 2 back feet, 2 side feet, 2 front feet. You can hobble anything. If you want to make the point, you're trying to use this as some grand example. This is not the point. The point is to never, ever use it for discipline. Never use hobbling to teach a horse a lesson and because you're angry, or never use hobbling as a punishment. It makes me sick to think of it. And I know that people do this, and I don't. I find that there are people who will turn to hobbling as a last resort when they don't know what else to do to intimidate or hurt or incapacitate or frighten a horse. And this I view as absolutely unacceptable. The highest and best use of hobbling is to teach a horse to wait and to think. Now, the person who's going to benefit the most will be your farrier, because the horses that are pulling their legs out before the nails are bent over and clenched, the horses that are afraid to have their foot pounded, the horses that basically, I feel very sad for the farriers, because they end up having to become the horse trainers for people who don't prepare the horse properly. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that a horse that's been taught to hobble won't do is break his leg trying to get out of a stall or under a stall wall or through a panel or cast in a trailer, or they learn to wait. And they don't learn to wait because they were taught that they were bad or there would be a punishment if they didn't, but because the timing on the release of a 1-foot hobble will show the horse
because miraculously they don't blame you for putting it on there, and they'll try to kind of look around and watch, and then they'll suddenly realize that you're standing over there, maybe 6 or 8 or 10 feet away, and they say, hey, wait a minute, I can't put my foot down. You walk over and you say, oh, gosh darn, let me help you with that.
So just for clarity, so that we're all kind of on the same page, when you say a 1 foot hobble, you're kind of referring to the leading by the feet. Like if we put a rope on this specific leg and start leading them by the feet, that's your introduction of 1 foot hobbling, or do you mean something else by that?
Well, you could do that. I'm speaking specifically of a figure 8 hobble where you put it around the elbow, right up at the forearm around the elbow, and then you just bring the pastern up to the back of the elbow. And I tend not to do this with shod horses because, I mean, I don't teach people how to do this with shod horses, because if you get it wrong and if your timing isn't good and you're out there freelancing on your own with this, I mean, there are certainly things that can go wrong with hobbling, which is why I teach it and why I don't sell hobbles.
So just for a visual, and I think some people refer to that as Scotch hobbling. So like it would be like you picked a hoof up, and so you have the heel of, let's say the front leg is up right by the elbow, and you're putting part of the figure 8 hobbles around the forearm, and the other part of the figure 8 hobbles around some part of the lower leg, maybe pastern. And so now there's
only, not the tendons.
Okay, and so now the horse is standing basically with, let's say, his left front leg is tied up, and he can't put that leg down anymore. Okay.
Then he'd have he can't put it down until he asks you, and then you say, oh, honey, hey, hang on here, I'm coming right now. If he struggles a little bit, and then he looks at you, he will be looking at you because he just figured out that he makes a triangle with the other 3 feet, which is exactly what you need him to do when the farrier comes and picks up a foot. These are very, very short lessons. These are very non-invasive lessons. We are not talking about hair rubbed off or horses flipping over, or you don't certainly do this when the horse is tied, but this is not a contest. This is part of an education because if you're going to be the one who's trying to hold the leg up to teach him for the farrier, the minute he starts to hop around or say no, generally speaking, he learns that with an extra 2 pounds, he can get his foot back. You don't want him to learn that, because you don't want them to start fighting the farrier. How many people have changed farriers because the farrier got a nail in the leg and cracked the horse in the gut with a rasp? How many horses get knocked around by a farrier because they get quickly hurt, quickly impatient? They already show up hurt from all the other horses they've had that have pounded them around. And the owners are standing there saying, oh, I have to change farriers. He's so mean. Why don't you train your horse to pick up his foot? That's what I have to say about that. Why don't you educate your horse? Have him there, have his feet clean, have him ready for the farrier. Have him ready, have him educated. The farrier is not your trainer unless you're going to pay him. And this just is infuriating to me, because the amount of entitlement and the amount of arrogance that people bring to the people who they are counting on to keep their horse sound and in good health, well maintained. I'm sorry, you just don't throw money at this. You got to throw some common sense in the right direction, and you got to show some self-respect by having your horse show up ready for what needs to be done. You don't take your unwashed kid with a mouthful of food to the dentist. At least have the kid rinse his mouth. At least have him in dirty diapers, whatever. I'm just saying, you have to, where I come from, it's very important to be respectful if you want respect.
Yes, ma'am.
You're going to bring what you want to the table. If you want to be treated in a way, you got to also show that you can treat in that way, in my view.
Absolutely. So in your process there, you would say one stage of it would be using timing and feel to have the horse. We're kind of focusing on this one leg at a time. And I could easily visualize how we can do that type of hobbling with the front feet. Do you change things up with the hind feet? Is there a different way to go about that, or you don't do the hind feet that way at all? Or how do we go from hobbling one front leg at a time to side hobbles or both front legs or so forth? What's your process there?
Well,
it depends on the goal. If I'm just trying to get a horse off the forehand, let's say a typical hand-fed pushy, crowd you out of the box stall horse that other people would call spoiled or rude, but we all know that he is responding to the seduction of hand-fed treats. He gets rewarded for putting his body on you, sticking his mouth on your hand and pushing you out of the way for a second treat. Okay, these horses are trained to be this way. You are not going to have good luck with a horse understanding how to shift his weight to his hips for a farrier if he's been hand-fed for 3 years or 2 years, and you're just going to start him in shoes for riding and all the rest. It's going to be basically front end heavy and rude is a subjective judgment, but by any standard, not as safe as another horse might be. If he had been taught, for example, in the first 9 months or year or 18 months, how to have his feet properly handled, how to tie, how to behave, how to be brushed, how to be led, how to back up a little bit in hand without scaring him. These kinds of foundations are really important if you want to have a horse that can not be in the pipeline for punishment. And to sum it up in the best possible way, I would say, I don't think most people enjoy punishing a horse. However, most classes and most courses teach you how to correct a horse for doing something you don't want. I don't teach that way. I show you how to educate the horse so that corrections aren't needed. I mean, why on earth would you tell your 13-year-old kid not to pick his nose at the dinner table? Only if you had failed in educating him properly about where to blow his nose when he was 2 and 3, quite frankly.
So let's say that like we have this horse that we've just worked on Scotch hobbling or where they have one front leg picked up. How do you go about getting
Scotch hobbling? I have to interrupt here. Scotch hobbling, in my understanding, is something else. Scotch hobble is where you tie the back foot to the neck, and I don't do that.
You're right. Yes, ma'am. Okay,
that's a Scotch hobble.
Yeah.
But that figure 8 hobble, I just call that a figure 8 hobble. It's a front foot figure 8 hobble. And then if you were going to tie up a back foot, and on all these horses I'm talking about now, that is not what I would do, because I don't want them any heavier in front. I would not help them. What I would do then is I would have a horse say, of course, he'd be able to tie. And then I would just pick up a back leg. What I would do is, generally what I do is I don't bother. It depends on what the horse has already understood. If he's already been turned out in bell boots and he's had shipping boots on, or, they've done all the protective, you're going to hurt yourself, so I'll protect you from yourself sort of thing. If that's the way the horse has been approached, then you don't have to be too worried about putting a loop around his back leg. But I never tie it tightly, because if you don't want a horse to get loose with a rope around his leg that he can't kick off. So I'll put, let's say, maybe an 8 or a 9-inch loop so he can kick it out if he has to, or if I lose him, or we both get stung by a bee and the whole thing goes to hell quick. You want to be able to always let a horse go and not have him be chased by a rope that's tied to his leg, because they'll run in a road or through a fence or anything else if they're not understanding that, as you know. So you don't want to tie anything on there that they can't accept. But let's just say that a horse has had bell boots on, or protective leg wraps or whatsoever. Then you could put something that is a single foot hobble, is actually, those mule chain hobbles they have, where they got a chain in between and 2 leather cuffs that they put on the front feet for those mules. So what I do when I get a chance and I find a set of those that's well made, not with that fleece on the inside, but triple lined leather. I don't get any of those fleece ones, because those have stitching on them, and they're backed with hard synthetic fabric that really raises hell. Once that fleece wears off, you're into some mess down there. So forget it.
It's also really easy to get burrs and things like that in the fleece that you're not aware of, and that winds up cutting a hole in your horse. Yeah. So yes.
Yeah. So I stay away from all that. I just use leather, and I make sure that if they get muddy, I wipe my tack down. I do take care of my equipment well, and I keep it soft, keep it pliable. So if you're going to use a single leather looks like a dog collar. It's half of a mule hobble. You take the chain away. You want to do that on the back leg, and then stand back with a rope. You would have both ends of. I wouldn't ever tie anything. I would never tie a rope on a horse that could get. Okay, so not by the leg, because they can run from that and damage themselves. Okay, because they can't get rid of it. But let's say that what you want to do is, maybe you don't know how to tie a bowline. Let's say you don't know how to tie a bowline in a rope. Take a 9-inch loop for the back foot or the front foot or the front leg if you need to stretch a shoulder or something. You want to use a leather dog collar looking single foot hobble. That's okay. But then you want to have 2 loose ends of the rope in your hand. Okay. So you can, if you had a 25-foot rope, you just double it. And then you've got your lead rope on the halter, and then you've got the front leg. You can have the rope right behind the pastern, or you can have the rope through a loop in a single foot hobble, which is like half a mule hobble. We're not talking now about a figure 8 hobble where you tie the leg up. I'm just talking about putting a collar around the pastern so that you can lead a horse with that if you don't know how to tie the right kind of knot in a rope.
Yes, ma'am.
On the subject of knots, I want to say that for some reason, not only women and girls, but nowadays men too, everybody seems so afraid of knots. I don't know what the problem is. You can tie your sneakers, you can tie a knot that a horse needs you to know. You need to learn a bowline, and you need to learn a half hitch, and you need to learn a clove hitch, and you need to learn a square knot. And if you don't want to learn any more knots than that, then that's okay. There's several other knots that are helpful, but it's no different than learning how to drive a stick shift car. It's no different than learning how to clean your teeth. It's no different than learning how to do anything that needs to be done. And if you are going to have horses and say that you don't know how to tie a knot, I would respectfully submit you can fill in the blanks after that. But it is basic.
Yep.
It is basic. That's like saying I've got 3 kids and I haven't learned how to change a diaper yet. What the hell's the matter? You certainly need to know how to tie some knots, and you need to know where to tie them, how to tie them, when to tie them, and if to tie them. And these are what I teach also in my classes to everybody. And we go over this online. We go over this at the clinics, because if you don't have the right education, you will ultimately make the wrong decision for your horse, and your horse will either be no longer able to do what you want or taken away from you, or you will be injured or something. You have to understand the basic things that horses need us to know about them and about caring for them properly. And that's all there is to it. Mm-hmm. So I really believe this strongly. And I think that this is why, for my money, if I were a student, I would rather stay away from the see and be seen clinics and get some real nuts and bolts under my belt so that you have the information when it's needed.
Yes, ma'am.
Like at 2 a.m, and you're on your own. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, I do. I'm a big fan of knots. We actually, on our YouTube channel, I've got several videos, tutorials on that sheet bend bowline and square knot. I know I've also got one with high lining where we show the trucker's hitch, Prusik hitch, and then one on like how to make a lead rope, a basic 3-strand plait, eye splice, those sorts of things. So I know a lot of people they're not interested in that, but I think that the skill set of it needs to be passed on for the few that are, because we don't need to lose that sort of knowledge for sure. It used to be a lot more commonplace that people would know how to tie some basic knots or do some simple splices, and now that's pretty rare, it seems. I even have some videos. We do a Theodore knot, which is definitely another level of complexity beyond a bowline or a square knot or something like that. But anyway,
do you have those on your website?
They're on my YouTube channel. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So we'll link them in the show notes if anybody's interested. Dolphin Horsemanship is what the YouTube channel is called. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, that's very good to know, and that's good. It's as it should be. I'm glad to hear that we reflect each other in that way, because really, horsemanship is a lost art. Horsemanship is misunderstood, it's a lost art, and it does take time. It does take the willingness to make errors. It takes the willingness to make errors, own them, and keep going, and not point the finger at someone because you made an error and your horse got hurt or you got hurt. Or, we're living in a time that's pretty surreal. And, I don't know. I said when my audiobook came out 14 years ago, that audiobook came out in 2007. And one of the things that I said in there in one of my pamphlets, I think it might have been in the 5th or 6th CD that was in there. It's a 10 CD audio set. And one of the things that I mentioned in there is that, contrary to public opinion, horses are zoo animals by now. If you got to keep something behind bars in solitary confinement, they're in a zoo. I'll stop short of calling it a prison because they didn't do anything to deserve that. And the people who are paying top dollar for those small pens are certainly not feeling like prison wardens. So I don't want to, add insult to injury, but the horses are kept in boxes, and it doesn't matter. They don't know what those boxes cost, but they do suffer the effects. And one of the effects of standing in a box all day is that you're on the forehand looking down the hall, usually in the direction of where the feed truck comes from. So if you're in that situation, what I like to have people do is get to know the people who are in the box on the other side. And every week you just shift stalls so that your horse can look the other way. And that way you can start to get a horse that's more balanced, because he will start to use his body the other way to look at the feed truck from the other side of the aisle. And if you have any sense at all, you do not want to ride a horse that can't turn both ways and flex his neck. But these horses that are looking down one side of the aisle for 10 years or 6 years or 8 months, they get stuck that way. And they, form follows function, Danny. And these horses load that left front leg to look left. They load that right front leg to look right. And the least thing they could do is just swap a stall with a horse across the way, so everybody has at least 50% better chance, so that people have at least a 50% better chance of riding a balanced horse without having to pay extra body work and extra massage and all the rest to balance out their animal.
I love that. So simple and thoughtful, and yet definitely not a common practice. People tend to have, this is Benny's stall, and Benny always lives in this stall, and Benny winds up territorial and left-sided because Benny always lives in Benny's stall. So that's a really good tip. Change things around. I like that.
Everywhere I go, I leave people with that, and a lot of people have tried it, and a lot of people are riding much happier, much more flexible horses with much less of a pissy barn attitude. So I highly recommend that barn managers take me at my word that you will have a much better clientele, much happier, safer horses to ride, and you will also have a much deeper understanding of what the horses need us to know about their flexibility and their experience of confinement. Don't think for a minute that going into your own toilet every day is a joy. Much better if you're a horse to be able to smell around and see what other horses smell like and what other horses have done, since they're not all out of pasture together. That's a very, very important thing that people forget, is how much horses need to have their nose talking to them.
Absolutely.
You turn a horse out in a new 20-foot pen, he's going to smell every single rail, every single inch of the ground, every single piece of the stall, anything he can reach. He's going to put his whiskers on, he's going to put his nose on, and that's going to talk to him. So this is just something people have to start thinking about, I think, if they want to have happier horses. But as I was saying a little earlier, to educate a horse is not the same as setting him up to fail so that you get to play trainer. This is the thing I'm trying to get people to understand. If you are correcting your horse for the same thing every day, twice a day, multiple times a week, then the horse is pretty clear that you really don't know what you want. And anybody observing with any intelligence will also be clear that you don't know what you want, because if you did, the horse would know. What the horse is clear about is that you enjoy correcting him, and that you repeatedly correct him for making the same mistake that he is set up to do, so that you feel satisfied with yourself as a trainer.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't like leaving people with that illusion. You are not a better horsewoman and not a better horseman because you showed him again what he did wrong. I would only say that if you're correcting your horse every day for the same thing or every week, that you're not clear on how to tell him what you want. And you might not even be clear on what you do want. And that's a good time to ask. That's a good time to get some input. That's a good time to send a video to someone who might be able to provide an answer that would have meaning to you, so that you can get out of the corrector role and stop the habit of pushing on your horse without understanding your contribution to the problem. But many people do feel as though when they firm up with a horse, by God, they have got some inner credit. A horse is just, oh boy, here we go. So the more beautiful relationships that I've been able to observe are when the person and the horse are genuinely interested in going somewhere together, not worrying about who's right and who's wrong, knowing how to go together with an understandable, reciprocal feel about where to put the feet, in what order, at what speed, and when. Because in the end, you asked me what kind of horses do I training, or what's my favorite kind of horse to work with or not work with. All I can say is whether you're talking about racing or pulling or gaited work or hackney ponies or cutting, reining, upper level dressage, eventing, any of it, the only thing these horses need you to know is where do you want their feet? It's simple. Where do you want their feet? You could go in any discipline. And what most people come to understand, really, when they start to think about it, is that they don't know. They don't know, because what starts to happen is feet go wherever they go when you use the mouth for balance. The feet go wherever they go when you have a lot of emotion going into a ride that you're unsure about. So the horse is getting the message of, okay, got a lack of confidence there, got fear up there. Now I've apparently made a mistake doing what I was told to do, and now they're pissed. So I get 2 spurs, a whip over the ass. Whoops, okay, now I'm on my way. Now I'm slammed down to a stop. I got my mouth tied shut around the bit. The nerve bundle's coming out of the maxilla, which is the top of your head, and onto your on either side of your sublingual salivary glands. You got that mouth tied shut. Can't even stick a credit card in between there, or can't even stick anything in there. It's up to the top thing. You're squeezing the hell out of the horse's face to the point where you do damage. And this is routine now. You can hardly buy a bridle without one of these things.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would only suggest that you might want to educate yourself about what it takes to keep a horse balanced and clear and interested, and have his groundwork and his social manners organized around the hindquarters, not around the general human tendency to want to express love and affection and proof of value in the relationship with hand-fed treats and crowding the eye. Some of the top trainers you'll see are standing there right blocking the horse's eye, and they could be back at the rear end of that horse just working on those rock-hard adductor muscles, rock-hard gaskins. Why don't you spend your time back there where a horse can't get any attention from another horse? They chew on the top of each other's withers, their necks, their backs, and their butts and all that. But down between those back legs where they do all the sporadic work and then have to go stand in a stall all day, that's where you ought to have your hands working.
Yes,
not
ma'am.
their face, in my opinion. So this is what I teach, Danny. This is what I take great pleasure in showing people how to do, because their horses come around really, really quickly when they start getting a different focus.
Yes, ma'am. You do talk a lot about it, and in the book with Bill, I find there's a very useful and practical blend between two worlds that don't necessarily work together as often as they should. And what I'm talking about here is kind of the philosophical 30,000 foot view of things, which you do a lot of talking from that perspective. But there's also a mechanics aspect to all of this, like you're talking about getting to the feet and knowing where we want the foot, how fast, and so forth. And a lot of times people will, I find this more from the customer base, the amateurs, they kind of think of a trainer as either being mechanical or philosophical.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Okay.
put the two together very often.
Okay, so
I'm not asking this question in a good way, but maybe you have an idea what I'm trying to get at.
are you asking me in what way do the techniques that I teach reflect the philosophy that I share with Bill?
Yeah, it's sort of that bringing together of the philosophical and the mechanical, because they're not at odds. They shouldn't be at odds, but I feel like a lot of people think they are at odds, and they should be working together, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
Well, let's put it this way. There's another dimension in this, which is your intention. Let's talk about that as more of a understanding intention. This is going to be parallel and going alongside of technique, and parallel and going alongside with alignment with your philosophy. But let's say I'm lying in bed in the morning coming out of some deep sleep, and I decide I want to start to help this horse understand what I mean when I want to change leads today. So there's an intention, and I'm far from the barn. Okay. So then I have to think, this is going to be a little bit of an answer for you here. Okay. So let's just take that, because this is where a lot of people want to say, well, I'll just want to go to your clinic, work on lead changes. Well, that's good. You ask them how many beats in a canter, they're not sure. Ask them, how does a horse change leads on his own? They have no idea. That's all in Bill's book. All those patterns and all those explanations are in Bill's book anyway. They are also very, very clearly in my videos, which are on YouTube, Videos for Kids, which I did almost 25 years ago. I did those in 94, for heaven's sakes. And that also is very clearly laid out in Bill's book and the audiobook as well. But if you don't know how a horse moves at all, you don't know you don't know the pattern of the footfall at the walk, the trot, the lope, you're not going to understand how to help a horse change leads. And quite likely, you're going to interfere technique-wise with how he changes leads. So let me tell you something that Dan Evans taught me. Dan Evans, who disappeared from the scene. I have no idea where he went. He's completely incognito or gone. I don't know, but he was an AQHA judge. He was a reining horse trainer. He got a hold of Bill's book and called me back in the right after it came out, right at about 2000. Okay. And I went down, and he very generously asked me to co-instruct a clinic with him in Texas. This was in 2000, right after Bill's book came out in 99. And he taught me something, taught the class something, and shared something with me that I thought was so simple and so wonderful. Because people, for example, this is just a roundabout answer to your question about how to blend in. So now I'm introducing the concept of intent. We're going to change leads, but we don't know how a horse moves. So we need to first learn that. What is the natural pattern of a horse's feet in a left lead and a right lead? All right. For those of you who don't know, quick review it. The lope is a 3-beat gait, lope or canter, okay? And just for the benefit of your foreign audiences, what we call a gallop is not what the Europeans call a gallop. Europeans, when they refer to gallop, they mean canter. They mean a gait, okay? So when I'm talking about canter, you Europeans, I'm talking about your gallop. When we gallop a horse over here, or when we or the British refer to gallop, we are literally talking about a 4-beat gait. Okay? 4 beats at a gallop. But for most Europeans, when they use the word gallop, and Scandinavians too, they are talking about 3-beat canter. I just wanted to say that because I assume that you've got people from all over the world who listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, ma'am.
At the lope or the canter to the left, we're not going to talk for the moment about how you arrive at that, but it's a 3-beat gait with a balance point in between. Your second beat is a diagonal. That means 1 foot on one side in the front and an opposite hind foot makes what's called a diagonal. What we're going to talk about at this moment, I'll go ahead and say that at the lope to the left, for example.
I tell you what, if we could...
You want me to shorten this up?
No, I was just going to say, I want to you talked about the 3-beat and 4-beat and all of that. I just want to say, so for clarity, for someone that might not understand this, the canter should be at the 3-beat gait, just like she's saying, but it can get divided into a 4-beat gait on both ends of the spectrum. So if you get a horse very, very, very collected, oftentimes that diagonal will break up and we'll get that hind foot hitting just before the front foot in a pirouette, for instance. In that maneuver, a horse will be very, very collected, but actually doing a 4-beat canter. The gallop you were talking about, which could have definitions depending on where you are. If you have a horse going wide open, like a racehorse, for instance, on a track, they will also break up the diagonal and have a 4-beat gait, also with the hind foot hitting before the front foot. But we're kind of on polar opposite ends of the spectrum of impulsion or speed.
What we're talking about is right.
Gate.
What we're talking about is the interruption of the balance point. The balance point is your diagonal at the 3-beat lope. And if you want to break that diagonal up to have a horse work in 4 beats, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. What matters is that he understands the instruction. Because speed and posture and direction need to be taught separately. And that is to have a well-educated horse, you teach speed separately than posture. You teach posture, meaning what shape is the horse. You try to teach all that at once, you're going to teach a horse to bolt. You cannot use your rein aids to teach speed, posture, and direction at the same time, or else your only function for speed with the reins will be to try to stop your runaway. And I don't want to get into that right now because that is an advanced discussion for people who understand what I'm talking about right at the moment. What I do want to say is that in the transition to changing leads, we're talking now about intention, and I'm going to circle back to the alignment and the congruence of Bill's philosophy, and which is a philosophy that I share, and the techniques that he teaches in his book and that I use and have also expanded on in my own classes over the years, and then I will be writing about in The Feel of a Horse. So let me just, for the moment, talk about this situation with changing leads. You're thinking about it remotely. You either wake up thinking about it, you're thinking about it on the way to the barn, you think, how am I going to get this horse to change leads? You go on the internet, you're going to find out that they say, well, you have to get a simultaneous lead change, or a back foot first, or a front foot first, or do you stop and start over? There's all these different things. All of those discussions are not very important if you understand that to get a lead change, you only need a change of the balance point. You want a lead change, you get a diagonal change. It is that simple. You change your balance point because when he's balancing on another diagonal, left or right, that is a lead change. And Dan Evans taught me that, and I feel like I should give the guy credit. It's not that I hadn't been writing those facts. It's not that I had been struggling with lead changes. I never knew how to teach it as well as he teaches it. You simplify it. You understand that at a lope, there is a diagonal. The lope, the canter, there's a diagonal. If you change the diagonal, then you also change the push leg and the lead leg. How do we get from a 2-beat trot to a 3-beat canter? You have to understand that the horse was created with the ability to add 1 extra beat to get a greater reach in each stride forward. And in order to do that, he has to give up 1 diagonal at the trot. Okay, so he's got a 2-beat trot occupying 4 feet. Each foot moves 1 time. That's 1 stride. So you have a 2-beat trot, which is an exchange of diagonal balance points. It's a very stable gait. It's a very reliable and safe gait in most cases, even if it's fast, because there's a lot of stability in it. Once you forfeit the horse's reliance on 2 diagonals and you give him 1 balance point, that other diagonal becomes a push leg and a lead leg. So you have a push leg, the remaining diagonal, and a lead leg. And to change directions, you need to change diagonals. So how do you do that? Well, you don't.
The horse does. Just look where you want to go and don't restrict him. And 99 out of 10% of the time, he's going to go ahead and swap legs so that he doesn't fall down. 99% of the time, if you're working a colt and he says, I got to go, Les, I say, okay, can I come? I'd rather go with you than have you buck me off. Can I go? Yeah, but don't tell me what to do with my feet. I got to go. So that's where Ray Hunt came in with all of us years ago, taught you how to ride speed without regard to direction, because you cannot load a horse's mouth up with your concerns about speed and direction at the same time if he hasn't been properly educated. The education about lead changes is to let him balance in the turn and ask him to make that turn by releasing the rein on an outside of his neck, not pushing on him, because that'll tip his head the other way. You release that outside rein so that he can lift with the opposite shoulder, and he'll take his own lead change. So that's how I teach it. I start with the intention. I want to change leads. I need to change diagonals. What do I have to do? Well, the easiest way is to have a horse in a big enough space so that the contour of the land will help him understand how to balance when you change direction and speed. Okay, so if you're loping uphill or downhill on a little arc, he's going to change his diagonal so he doesn't trip and fall. And then he's on the right lead. And then you just open your toe on the new lead leg you want. Why would you spur him on the outside? Because what does that do? All that does is run into your old groundwork. If you're trying to be on a horse on his first 10 rides with a heavy outside leg, it shows you that you've missed a couple things, I hate to say. Sorry, folks. You want to come in with a heavy outside leg on a green horse. What's your groundwork foundation for that? Where does he learn to turn away from you when you put impulsion on his left flank and his left hip or his left shoulder? When you're on a lead rope on the same side, he's learned how to look at you while you thump him out of the way. You don't get on a green horse and start hammering with an outside leg unless you feel like getting bucked off or making some trainer friends of yours some good money, because those horses will learn right away to take their head toward your active leg, as instructed in 1 or 2 or 3 years of groundwork ahead of time, right? They're going to come toward the action on the side of their body where you're coming in with that new leg as a new ride. Holy cow, he says, hey, wait a minute. Who taught you about, wait a minute, you didn't meet my trainer. What are you doing? Well, unfortunately, a lot of these poor people who do this are the same people who got an A+ in the groundwork class, but they didn't understand that you don't put an outside leg on a green horse.
Yes,
It'll
ma'am.
tighten him right up. It'll tighten him right up and he'll want to take his head right away from you and bring his head and neck around to what you've taught him on the ground. This is what Buck is fantastic. He said years ago, and I worked with him a number of years. He said, this is a thinking people's game. It's a thinking person's game. And I know that he's right. It is a thinking person's game. Why do you get an absolutely lovely execution on the ground from many horses that are even handled by people that never handled a horse in their life? And their groundwork is fairly reliable, quite nice to look at. They're accurate. They don't interrupt their groundwork with a lot of heavy correction. They finally got it worked out. And then the second ride, they get bucked off. Third ride, they get bucked off. Sixth ride, they've got the horse going off to a trainer. What in the world? What in the world went wrong? Well, don't hammer on the outside of his ribs.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I'm getting at here. So these are the types of things where you want to get your techniques following the actual facts of what a horse has been trained to do before you get up there. You got to have your riding match your groundwork. So another wonderful thing Buck taught me, and I have absolutely no problem saying it. He's a very, very, very good instructor. And I haven't worked with him since probably 1999. But I had a lot of time back in the 90s at his courses. Ringside mostly, but plenty of active participation in the horsemanship and the groundwork and a lot of different stuff. So trailer loading, all of it. He's a very, very helpful teacher. And one of the things that he made so abundantly clear that I really, really appreciated is that if you want to release a horse to go, it's not about throwing away the reins. Just take your leg off. If you've been one to kick a horse forward, well, he already knows what's coming. He's ready to go. He doesn't have to brace up and wait for you to gun him in the ribs.
Just release him and offer him a field run. Let him run. He already knows what happens when a person takes their leg away. He's going to get kicked. So just don't kick. Liven up your body. Don't kick him. And pretty quick here, all you got to do, as Bill would say, is just wiggle your toe in your boot. You got to gallop from a standstill.
Yes, ma'am.
That Bill was always fun to say that. He said, yeah. And he said, you can get a lead change, just wiggle the toe in your boot. He said, that way a fella doesn't know what you're doing. He'd smile a little bit when he said that. Bill had some pretty tricky horses to start. And then we got them refined up the line to the point where you could wiggle the toe in your boot. He liked that. He said the best place to work on one stride lead changes is on the way home.
Yes, ma'am.
He said, because there's no shortage of interest in going home, and not going to be, zooming out into the pasture or down the hill with you. They just got a lane to lope home on, and you wiggle your toe in your boot and just let them tip their head a little. Then you get that diagonal change, and you're on your way.
I do feel financially obligated to remind everyone that if you're having trouble getting impulsion out of your horse by just taking your leg off, you could try Speedy Feet. Remember, it's not a myth, but it might be meth. All right. So I guess that will get them moving. I've never been inspired to drug up my horses, but I'll remember that if I get a real dead one. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm kind of running out of time here. I'm going to have to take off in a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you one other question here, and that is kind of about the totality of your career. Do you have any regrets, remaining goals, fears, plans to share? What are your thoughts on your legacy here, Leslie?
You asked me 7 questions there, so let's review them, and I'll pull one out from the A through F list. Are there any fears, regrets, goals? You said fears, regrets, goals, or what all else?
Fears, regrets, remaining goals, or plans to share. Let's say fears first. Do you have any fears about your legacy, that people will misunderstand something, or that you won't get a topic covered that you wanted to get covered? Anything bothering you there?
No, not as people understand that I still consider myself a very naive person when it comes to the topics I'm exploring now, which is one thing I do have a passion to share, and this goes into not the fear of not being able to do it, but I would beg everybody's indulgence if you're fed up with the kind of care that you've been able to find for your horse, not only in terms of availability, but affordability. There's no reason in the world that you can't be much more proactive in maintaining your horse's, aligning and maintaining your horse from the knee and hock, stifle, and elbow down. I noticed that most body workers don't go much below the elbow, and they don't go much below the stifle. Most people don't know how to adjust a stifle. Most people don't know how to get the scapula right off that the withers, and I would love to be able to share that with more people who are in the healing arts and the alternative health modalities. These are things that I do routinely and teach my students. I want to make you, so fear and goal. I won't say fear. That's a little too much, but I have a burning desire to show people how to read a horse correctly and not stick a saddle on a horse and go somewhere if you don't see 2 functional scapulas. If you look at your horse, right down his spine, you get on a bucket, stand behind him, and look straight up at the withers. If you don't see 2 clearly defined scapulas and a wither in between that looks sort of like a funny M, you can't see both scapulas moving freely, why would you saddle and go? When that scapula is pushed up into that withers, that shoulder is out, that elbow is in, that knee is out, that fetlock is in, and that toe is out. They have to align this way. If you take that free flowing scapula and you smash it up in there, let's say you're a roper, for example. And I'm not picking on the ropers. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying, whether you're a barrel racer, a roper, a jumper, anybody, you've had your horse in a restricted roll cur thing, however you do it. If you can look up your horse's rear end, straight up his spine, and you can see that you've got a look like this on one side. Okay, you've got that on one side, and you've got this on the other side. You don't see this little ridge where that scapula is pointing up. You want to make sure that you know how to free that so that you don't start a problem down the road that you start trying to with a new farrier because you haven't learned how to get that scapula freed up. I teach this to every student I have that's got a horse like that, because you can do it yourself. You want to just make sure that when you have a horse that either has a fixated scapula stuck up into the withers, or you've got a horse whose patella has already had one of the lateral ligaments slip up over the top of the patella or not accepted anymore. You've got
I've lost you again, Leslie. I don't know if you can hear me.
My goal would be to be common knowledge. You do not need to be a veterinarian or a certified body worker or anybody else to understand when your horse is lame, there is something you can do about it to help him. Massaging your horse is not against the law. Setting a scapula is not against the law. Helping your horse put his leg back in position is not against the law. And so I am very, very dedicated and will include in my book how you do this, because it's quite important for people to understand that they have a lot more potential to improve their horse's well-being, their horse's comfort. As you know more and know better, you can do better. I'm not talking about taking business away from professionals who are exclusively qualified and licensed to do these things, but giving your dog a back rub and helping a horse get his stifle back in the right position is, I would consider that more your obligation and privilege that you have as an educated person to help support your horse in between what other body work or maintenance sessions you might want to schedule. I'm just saying, for your own safety, you need to understand where the horse is vulnerable. And so it's not so much a fear that I won't be able to share this knowledge, but it's a goal to have this become common knowledge, just like picking out the horse feet. Just the same as wiping down your tack, picking up the feet, or giving them a bath on a hot day. This is regular maintenance and does not need to be the province of people who are, charging $200, $300 a visit. It's ridiculous. You can do it yourself. So that's one goal I have. As far as my legacy, I think a legacy isn't up to somebody. I think that's what other people would decide if I earn a legacy. I think other people. I'm helping Bill with his legacy. I don't think I help myself with my legacy. I think that's what other people do if I've been producing meaningful content and helping them make the changes that were in line with either their values or their needs, things like that. I think that's more what I would look at a legacy as. It's not really my business. Maybe after I die, I have one,
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a pretty neat perspective on it. It's not yours to direct, right? That's pretty cool. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now we talk about a bucket list and my fears. Okay. I, for very good reasons, have not a fear, but I've got a great respect for having your lungs fill up with water. Okay, that's called drowning.
For having what?
Yeah, your lungs fill up with water.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have a very deep respect for that, based on a few things that went on in my rough and tumble childhood. So I certainly can swim. I certainly love going sailing. I love sailing. I love swimming. I don't like being bitten by fish. I've been bitten by fish. I don't like that. So I have a deep respect and also a love of the water. But so I would love to learn how to dive and look at all the beautiful things that my diving friends have told me about. But I do have a trepidation about that. So we'll see whether that could ever happen. I have the same feeling about flying. I've often wanted to. My father used to get us these gliders that you had the rubber band with a propeller, and they were made out of balsa wood, and you could fly those things all over. maybe they were little airplanes. I don't know. But anyway, I used to make
Hobby
paper
Lobby.
airplanes.
Yeah, let me just say Hobby Lobby. If you know of any little boys or little girls interested, 99 cents balsa wood kits at Hobby Lobby. That's a great Christmas stocking stuffer or whatever more kids need. Those. They still exist, ladies and gentlemen. So, okay, sorry, I had to throw that out there.
So, no, I'm glad you did. So, I'll tell you a little secret. We'll end on a little secret here, okay? I had a rather abrupt end to my reporting career. And about 3 years later, I was married. And 2 years after that, I decided to go to law school. And I wanted to continue sort of where my reporting interest headline, which is in water case law, clean water case law, water supply, water use, all of it, for business, for industry, for agriculture, for home use, all of it. So I decided I would go to Western New England Law School, which wasn't too far away from where I was living at the time. I studied hard for the LSATs and got the 3 worst scores they had ever had in the history of that test.
We lost you again, Leslie. The 3 worst tests, I guess, that in the history of that law school, I think is what you were saying.
Well, yes, apparently, and sad to report, it took me about 6 months to take the test 3 times. I was awarded the 3 worst scores they said that they'd had in the history at the testing center. Usually people do better. And I did get coaching, and I did go and take tutorials. I took special classes. I got worse score every time. Lo and behold, I would have been a lousy lawyer anyway. And here's why. 6 months later, I got a letter from the dean following up with a phone call, said that I had an extraordinarily professional and impressive resume and application. They hadn't had, in his tenure as the dean, they had not had a comparable application, but he wondered what I could possibly do about those. And I said, well, what's the reason for your call? He said, well, this is a sensitive matter, but you happen to have any indigenous blood or of color? And I said, sir, I don't know what your nationality is, but I'm pretty white. And he said, well, unfortunately, we do have to fill a quota. Now, this is why I would have made a very bad lawyer, because I could at that moment have occurred to me that that's some kind of reverse discrimination. And I had he said the best application they'd had in his tenure, but I had no interest because I had the wrong color skin. Oh my gosh. So anyway, as it turns out, I just went waltzing off into the sunset with my lead rope and my horse, and the rest is history. So that's what I did. Was I started a riding school, and I have never looked back. And that's what I still do. And that's where I still am. So I thought you would get a kick out of it because, the idea was to have been more involved with the oceans and with protection of the planet, protection of the water resources, and a more equitable way of using and protecting the right of the downstream user, which is what it's called riparian case law, which came out of England in the 1600s. And, the Delaware River Basin Commission and many of these other organizations out in the West Coast and the Colorado River, we could have done much better with our resources. But anyway, I had to move on from all of that because, unfortunately, I didn't get into law school, and I'm not sure that I would have been happy with a sedentary life anyway. So I felt motivated by the right reasons, but I think you're right. I think I'm probably able to do more good in my life by not sitting in a chair all day and dealing with people that are mad at you. So hopefully was able to answer your questions in a nice way for you.
Well, I have enjoyed the conversation tremendously. I really get a kick out of you every time I get to chat with you. It's always, I never know where it's going to go, but it's always a fun time. And I learn something new every time I talk with you. And I appreciate the hell out of that. And thank you for coming on and giving of your time and everything. Like I say, we will in the show notes We'll have links to all of Leslie's stuff, so y'all will be able to find her and see where she's giving her next clinic, or when her book comes out, order it, or join her group and be able to ask questions of her yourself and everything. So thank you, Miss Leslie, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure.
You are entirely welcome. And it's just been a we could stick with it and see this through to a good result. And I thank you very much for having me.
As I stated on the front end, we were having connection difficulties, and that got significantly worse at the end of the interview. She was cutting out every 30 seconds. So she actually had some thoughts on some questions that she wanted to answer a little more fully, and she recorded that in an audio file and sent it to me. And so this last portion of the podcast is her revisiting some of those questions on her own and answering as she wanted. And hopefully the audio that you can hear is much better in this instance than what I was able to catch while I was talking with him.
So I do regret not spending more time with my dad. My father, Peter, was a young father at 25 and was in the Merchant Marines and later in the U.S. Army, post-war Europe. He was a Russian translator for the military and stationed in Central Europe and at times, I guess, in Russia. He spoke several languages. My mother did too. So I regret not learning languages from both of them. They were fluent in more than one. And didn't see much of my father when I was growing up. I did before the age of 10, but between 10 and 36, there were probably a handful of times I saw them, and most of those circumstances were pretty shabby. Through no fault of our own, just shabby arrangements all the way around, through which we tried to maintain a good connection and a way of communicating and respecting and loving each other that could stand the test of time. And fortunately, I have to say it did, but it was very, very challenging. He was a courageous and brave kind of man. He had a lot of very fascinating dynamics about the way he would approach a situation. He believed many things. He was not at the time well read, but he was well traveled. He was well read in the last 20 years of his life, for sure. Read 2 newspapers cover to cover and a couple of books a week. But before that, as a sea captain, and before that, as a sort of jack of all trades, he was in the trades. Anything from contracting to refrigeration, electronics, plumbing, street work. He could do anything he needed to. Car repair, motorcycle repair. He was just one of these fix-it guys. But he raised us to love animals, and he raised us to understand that no is a complete sentence, that the color of someone's skin is no reason for anxiety, and never to be shy about punching someone in the nose. It was another one of his great lessons that my brother and I both learned before the age of 8. I wasn't all that kind to my brother on certain days, I guess, and my father one time showed him, tentative at 6, how to knock me right in the nose with his fist. Tentative little fist wasn't too bad of a knockout, but it hurt enough for me to get the point, and I had an opportunity to test that skill out later in life. I only did it once. Missed the nose, got somebody's ear, and would never do it again. When you've been working with horses your whole life, you don't go around punching someone in the head. It's a little more than that you probably mean to do. Anyway, that was fortunately a good many years ago, a few decades actually. But it's a good skill to have. The confidence to do it is an important thing. and to know when it's the right time. I'm not sure at 70 years old I'd be swinging at anybody. It's kind of laughable to think about, actually. But spending time with my father was never not interesting. He could be a very selfish man, extremely selfish, and he had some fears as well. He had a temper. He sipped all sorts of alcohol at the end of his life, but I never saw him drunk once. As a child growing up, he'd have a beer on the weekends or a glass of wine at dinner if it was served at somewhere where we were or some restaurant. But he was not a drinker, and he was not a drug taker, but he was a hard worker. I could say that just like that. He was a hard worker, and he achieved his goals. Most, if not all of them, as far as I'm aware. And he had a horse to the end of his life. And he rode right up until he was about 91, I think. I think he could still get on a horse when he was 91, and be taken up the mountain by that horse, and then he would walk down. So he was a big piece of my guidance system, even though I didn't see him for 20 years, roughly. Those regrets, I don't know how else to describe, except that I didn't come up with them when you asked. There's another third regret, and that concerns a racehorse trainer from Estonia who attended a clinic I did back in about 98, right north of Helsinki, Finland, at a country kind of fairground sort of gathering place, a bunch of fields and maybe a few outbuildings, and they had some kind of a strange fencing set up, the working areas for someone to demonstrate with a horse, and there were about 15 or 20 of us from all over the world. These were the most unsuitable pens you can imagine. They sort of shared a fence line with one another. They were about 15 square feet, if that. That's, a large box stall, broodmare stall or something. It was kind of hard to operate in there, but anyway. Had a number of people there who spoke English and a variety of other languages, and he finally located someone who was trilingual, could speak his language and Finnish and English. And so I was asked, how do I do what I do? He said he had struggled for several years to dominate and manage and control and get the results he wanted from a stallion that was at the track where he worked. I guess he owned it, from what I could tell. I wanted to know how I could get all these things done without hitting the horse and without getting angry and without using a stud chain and whips and stuff. So I told him, don't use those things because, number one, it hurts. Number two, it confuses a horse. Number three, it sets them up to not want to be around you much, to be frightened of you, because it's terrifying to be whipped and held by a short chain or a short rope and whipped. And also it builds such a seething undercurrent of distrust that you're really not well advised to, put the bottom half of yourself on a top half of a horse. You're really not well advised to put the bottom half of yourself on the top half of a horse that you've treated that way. It's preposterous. Why on earth would you? So I explained to him those things, and it's why I didn't do it. And I encouraged him to maybe consider something else. And he said, well, I don't know really what else to do. I don't really understand what you did. And he said, I just kind of gave up. He said, I've exhausted myself on this horse, punishing him so many times, and he doesn't ever seem to learn the lesson, and he never screams, but I just finally had to give up. Well, that was something to hear. That upset quite a few people
who heard it, people in Finnish who heard it. And it upset me to have it translated. And I thought to myself, what can I do to help this guy? So I did show him a few things he could do with his lead rope and encouraged him to just try to offer a little more release, a little more softness. Wasn't really the best advice because I don't really know how troubled and how upset the horse was. But I did want to offer him some support, and as we folded up for the day, I could see that he was crying. And after everybody cleared out, he was supposed to leave to catch a ferry to get back across the water. And as we all left, he was an hour and a half later still doubled up over the steering wheel, crying uncontrollably, sobbing. And the regret connected to this is that I never got a phone number or an email so I could follow up with him and send him a book, teach him some of the things. I let him look at the pictures that were in the book that Bill had there, that I wrote with Bill. That was a regret, I think, in some ways even more profound for me than the others. And on a brighter note, there was one, maybe a fourth regret, is that I never got to know better the lessons that there might have been to learn from this veteran from the Arab-Israeli conflicts in the 60s. I believe it was 67, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I had some very, very intense sessions with a fellow suffering from PTSD. He was an Israeli sniper. And he came across me somehow. He was tucked away in some little hamlet in northern England. And he had a riding operation going, a lesson business going with a partner of his, a woman quite a bit older than he was, who kind of looked after him somehow, financially for sure, and I suppose also with comfort and meals and different things. Anyway, she paid my bill to go there. And he was pretty much of a wreck, but the horses liked him. He was a big player. He took up a lot of space. He was a guy who mentioned to me that he could hit a sparrow at a mile. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if you can hit a sparrow a mile away if you're, got one in your sights. I don't know enough about shooting at that range and in that way to be able to verify what he said, but it was an impressive statement, and it was impressive the way the horses worked for him. I wasn't that comfortable around the guy at all. Not at all. I didn't feel personally threatened, but he didn't inspire, he didn't inspire ease. He wasn't a relaxed kind of a guy. He'd jump and look behind him still at almost anything that made a sound. So he was somehow greatly soothed and calmed by these horses. And I did my best to copy after their example and not get too concerned about his ways of moving and his behaviors and his suddenness about things. But those are all things that kind of come in the same category of, I wouldn't say unfinished things. At some point you find closure and you move on, but those four events stand out in my mind as something maybe a little bigger than just saying no. I have no regrets. I could have regrets about those things.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.